and see if that fixes it. Weird. Okay, I think it's fine now. Nope, it's not. Wait, is it? Huh. Oh, yes. Okay. All right. Okay, so YouTube is up now too, and I can monitor chat. Okay. All right. I thought maybe I would put a topic up. I hadn't thought of one yet, so I'm gonna do that right now. Let me just process life for a second. Oh, gosh, I've been thinking about a lot. Hmm. Hmm. What about what about 1 second, I'm thinking. What about like self-exclusion as a concept in general that like people may, let's talk about that. Do like self-exclusion after having problems in an environment or in a, like mostly with bullying, I would argue, but yeah, I want to think about that a bit. Where is this? Boop. Nope, that's not it. Wait, what? Hold on a second. Huh, it's weird. Okay. Ooh, polyvagal theory. You know what's interesting is that I'm going to be looking at that in relationship to fascia. I have a video on the docket. I wish I had watched it in advance of today because then I would feel actually here. Can we hit that up next week and then I can do a little prep for it because there is an aspect of that that would be interesting for me to touch on regarding some of the movement theory stuff that I know. So I would like to revisit that, but after I have a chance to watch that, because there's a connection to the vagus nerve and fascia, and I need to watch it. Yeah, the video I need to watch is Fascia Burnout in the Nervous System and Why Self-Care Won't Solve Everything. It's like a 40-minute video. So I would like to do that. Let's have that for next week. If we can find a reminder system, it doesn't have to be right now. We could make sure that that happens. Let me look up one more thing. There's another way that I should talk about this. Self-exclusion is actually like a thing to do with gambling as a term. I was trying to think of a way to explain what I'm thinking of, but that's not a good thing.
Yeah, I was wondering if we could have a term situation phase.
Yeah, let's work on that because I don't think there's a term for this. I've just sort of been talking about it without knowing if there's already been a conversation. So I haven't heard anything about this, but like, just like removing yourself from things after learning that
Uh-huh.
there's issues with it so that you stop participating in,
Uh-huh.
like there's like a fear response there, but it's also like it's not anxiety because I think it got, for me, sometimes situated as, oh, you're like
No,
shy. Do you have one? Hello?
Hello?
Wait, Lilith? Look,
Oh, I
well,
suppose I could. Um, la 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 la.
maybe I should ask
Yeah,
ChatGPT too if there's already a term in psychology.
testing, testing, testing.
Hello, can you hear us? Avoidance behavior? See, I don't know if avoidance behavior follows this for me.
Hello, hello, hello.
Hello, welcome in.
Hey.
Do we have some technical difficulties?
Oh, there we go. I could hear.
Yay, welcome in.
Excellent.
Cool.
See, avoidance behavior is not it either, because they're like avoidance behaviors are actions people use to distract themselves from or escape difficult feelings, thoughts, or situations. I mean, kinda, but there's something else. I need something more neutral than this.
Hmm. Can you give an example? Like, is it like avoiding going to a place because you're afraid of how people are going to treat you, or?
Well, so let's say you've had um, experiences with bullying, right? And you don't feel you have control
Okay.
over avoiding the bullying itself. So if somebody, let's say they enjoyed an activity, it could be a hobby, it could be a class. I'm going to give a example from my life where there's like a dance company I was working with and I could not figure out how to crack it socially. And I didn't want to go to rehearsals, but I kind of pushed through because I had a commitment. But if I could have gotten out of that, I would have. And then I started to avoid more things that were potential opportunities because I was starting to self exclude because I didn't know how to prevent bullying. Or like certain spaces I've been to in the past, if I've experienced like a confusing interaction that felt out of my control, I might no longer want to participate in the activity itself or do anything similar to it. So it's like kind of like a learned um, decision of like not wanting to uh, be helpless or without an ally, like someone who's on your side in a situation. So if you feel isolated, so then you self isolate to not create that same dynamic again. But you see what I'm saying? Where it's like this sort of has to do with like us hermiting away specifically because we had not only a negative experience, but we weren't expecting the negative experience. Or you see what I'm saying? So there's like, there's more to it because it's not just like a simple anxiety issue or avoidance. It's like there's no solution to this. So why would you put yourself in the situation again?
Hmm.
And so it's like avoidance, if I look at it, for example, it says rethinking avoidance towards a balanced approach to avoidance and treating anxiety disorders. Avoidance is typically considered a maladaptive behavioral response to excessive fear and anxiety, leading to the maintenance of anxiety disorders. Exposure is a core element of cognitive behavioral therapy for anxiety disorders. So it's like this is the problem that I have with that entire framing is I believe that autism is a form of asocial blindness that we have never experienced this ability to perceive, let alone intake these perceptions. Like we basically never developed it. That would have been impossible. Um, and so when we go into these situations, we really are disabled. And so for us to then be kind of taught that it's excessive fear and anxiety as opposed to a real situation that is happening only to us because of our autism and is comparable to other forms of like lacking sensory information where we can't process this kind of information and other people rely on it and it's creating problems and we can't get accommodations. So I feel like it's actually an accommodation issue, and that's why we need to talk about the self-excluding where it's not rooted in us. Also, hi Hokey Man in chat. Oh, and Hokey Man, my new husband and I are doing great. Thank you. We have been good, and thank you so much for the congrats. Yeah, see what I'm saying? So it's like I was thinking like, oh, well, maybe like self-exclusion is a way to talk about it, so there's more volition in this instead of like it being compulsive, because the whole like anxiety thing sounds like the anxiety is compelling you to do this maladaptive behavior, as opposed to it being a rational response to a situation without proper accommodations.
Well, so like generally speaking, people don't just do maladaptive behaviors, right? Maladaptive is a label we put on behaviors that are adaptive in some circumstances, but we're saying they aren't adaptive in a current set of circumstances, right? Does that make sense?
1 second, I'm just gonna have to respond to my mom. 1 second.
Did what I say make sense?
Can you repeat that
Or...
one more time? My mom just was asking me about Mother's Day stuff because we're gonna eat dinner at home.
Yeah, no, I've lost track of where I am and what's happening.
Okay, Kyle, can you repeat it?
I heard her and I got distracted by her as well.
Yeah, my
So
mom.
I'm so sorry.
Okay.
I was like trying to listen, but it was like
So Jane, you were saying something about how it's getting labeled as maladaptive,
Yes.
right? And I was just highlighting that like when I talk about maladaptive stuff, it's in relation to post-trauma where you're triggering things that were adaptive in the circumstance you were stuck in because you didn't have better resources, right? And so it's maladaptive that you're continuing to use them even though you've left those circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
So Jane, what you're basically saying is that as an autistic person, especially child or teenager, you're still in those circumstances that caused you to react this way
Yes.
adaptively, right? It's
Yes.
not
Yes. Yes. Yes.
maladaptive until you
Yes.
change the reality that has caused you to self-exclude,
Right.
right? Same way, like if all of a sudden you're put into a place with people who treat you poorly, then it's not maladaptive to attempt to avoid them.
Mm-hmm.
Even though generally humans need social contact,
Mm-hmm.
it's still more adaptive to avoid abusers than it
Right.
is to not avoid
Right.
them, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
And I also want to center, instead of saying bullying, you can say peer abuse. That's
Mm-hmm.
what it is. You're
Mm-hmm.
simply abused by your peers, and the term bullying is part of the normalization of that abuse as something less than abuse.
Yes. Yes. Thank you for saying that. And yeah, peer abuse is I love this term because it also creates a broader dialogue about abusive patterns over one's lifetime, and then we can open up that framework into various forms of peer abuse that we currently are not recognizing or that we're minimizing for the sake of the abuser and the abuser being acceptable to society while these people self-exclude. And that's my problem with this is that abuse people will tend to be like higher on narcissistic traits even if they're very young, even if this is something that's happening in our peer group in middle school. And then these people will have the advantage of being given more opportunities because people have self-excluded who are the targets of this abuse, which invariably are people with neurodevelopmental disabilities. And autism in specific is very challenging because adults don't see the peer abuse. They see you as mature, or they see you as having positive traits to their standards, and then they don't understand that the dynamic that you're put in is not being held to that standard, so it doesn't matter. Like, yeah, my teachers liked me. That didn't do anything
Right.
for what was happening.
And actually, like the effect on autistic people from peer abuse is worsened because we have a delayed rate of emotional development.
Right.
So we're not even at the level of our peers in age when it comes to being able to handle these sort of things, right?
Exactly. Yes.
Um, and like personally, I'm fairly certain a huge part of the issue is that peer abuse is a normalized part of our culture, even when it's so-called like healthy, normal, and not involving bullying. It still actually does involve small amounts of bullying that is used normatively, right? So it's like a normal amount of bullying. And so when they do research, they associate normal with good, right?
Yep.
So even though it's a normative amount of putting people down and things like that, it's actually used to help put people who are able to react normatively to it to meet the social guidelines and to develop in the normal way that people are supposed to in this particular situation. Uh,
Exactly. Yeah, and there's like
right?
this pressure to
Because
keep us
because
in
the
it as
norm
if
is
we'll
not
learn.
healthy,
Right.
right? The norm is not to maximize health and happiness at all terms. That is not the norm
Mhm.
at all among humans.
Mhm.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it's like you'll be placed into more pressure potentially because it's like, oh, well, you're weak, so you need to toughen up. You need to be exposed to this, and this led to even more overwhelm. This led to me not telling adults because that would be the response is that, oh, well, you're going to grow like your peers and adapt to this pressure that they're giving you. They didn't even understand the pressure was different for me because I can't meet these demands because I can't see what these peers were able to see and use and manipulate as information as part of this whole dynamic. So I was disincentivized to even tell authority figures or adults what was happening to me because the adults would actually side with the abuser. Wow. Yikes.
Yeah. Dan Shep actually linked these TikTok videos today in the Autism Survival Gear channel from let me just quickly open this link
Mm.
to see how from a autistic counselor and educator
Mhm.
talking about the difference in conflict resolution norms between autistic and holistic people.
Mm.
Um, and
Mm.
um, I can't just recite it all because I didn't learn it that well from watching it once. But
Right.
basically, it explains how even beyond peer abuse, the natural dynamics of like holistic autistic friendships tend to lead towards the autistic people feeling slighted more and more over time by the
Right.
autistic person and eventually getting frustrated and
Mhm.
walking away without saying anything about
Mhm.
the relationship,
Yes.
while the autistic person has no idea that this has been going on and
Yes.
feels like it's just a sudden abandonment,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And the mismatch just sort of naturally develops bad feelings on both sides, but like can be traumatic to the autistic person, it cause abandonment trauma as it
Mhm.
happens more and more over time.
That makes
Um,
a lot of
and
sense.
then I just watched a video about the what was the polyvagal stuff, and part of what he was mentioning is just that being in the so-called green mode, as he told it, the safe mode, causes you to act in a way that other people think you are safe to be around and thus are happier to be around. And the signals of this are things that autistic people don't seem to naturally do, which is like put out the
Mm.
right vocal tones and
Mhm.
the right facial movements. So
Mhm.
this would actually explain like not just explain but actually explain why people might find autistic people standoffish or other things that they say about us
Yep.
even though we feel like we're not doing them, by showing actual specific things that aren't happening in our bodies that do in other people's. Instead of saying like you're autistic, right, which isn't exactly explanatory at all.
No, exactly. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, and I think this is where I get into like my theory of this is that autistic people, we navigate through the world with a limited set of information, and we use information that's recursive. We use information that helps us to build something that's long lasting because we cannot interact with this like minute by minute, second by second competition sorts of information where like this is why I say like doing is building, doing is arriving. So what other people are doing is they're negotiating with each other somewhat constantly with information that tells them about their position in space as their primary metaphor, and that this is what social relations typically are, is this metaphor of moving spatially and then being conscious of where you are relative to various goalposts or like objectives in the room, even the metaphorical room, and the individuals, so that you know how close or far away you are from people and these kind of like landmarks or finish lines. And this is where we get like hierarchies and competition. And that autistic people literally can't see this information. So we're in the way a lot. And we also get upset because people will destroy what we're working on in service of these minute by minute goals that are building towards some hierarchical, linear sort of progression of like, and now I've beaten this, I've won the race. I've got first place, you got second, you got third, and we're not in it at all. But we're still in the same physical location, right? So we're like literally in the way. We're literally being, frustrating and not able to participate in the game that people are playing and keep changing the rules in real time. And that's part of the fun, is being able to change the rules in real time with each other, which we can't do because we can barely understand it in hindsight. Because it's all conceptual for us. It's not an embodied lived thing because we don't have that aspect of our brain developed in the first place to do any of this.
Yeah.
Also, I'm going to pull up the chat, by the way.
These videos from TikTok that I just watched. It's just a series of 3 videos. And what I find very interesting in this moment is that basically it posits a whole additional axis of the failure between autistic and autistic communication on top of what you just talked about, Jane.
Let's watch it,
right.
maybe?
Yeah,
we
could.
Yeah. Okay. Let's
all
get everyone
watch
on
it
the
together.
same page.
I think
Yeah.
that would be great.
Okay, let's do it. I'm gonna do share screen. Hold on a second. And I hope that will.
I've got to go help my wife wash the bleach out of her hair anyhow. So. Okay. Do that.
Okay. We good? Oh, 1 second. Let me make sure I can hear this. This one. Okay.
Friendship trauma series. This is not going to include the demonstration of the autistic to non-autistic friendship termination. I know people are waiting on that video. I really want to get it up tomorrow. I just realized I need to add further context as to what's going on. So I'm going to continue talking about autism and friendship trauma, this time by discussing the way our processing and communication styles create opposing methods of
Jane,
conflict
this
resolution.
is actually part
For the time
2.
being, we're going to.
Oh, it is. Okay. Let me go back. Hold on a second. Sorry.
Yeah, the one in the middle is actually the first.
Oh, okay. Okay, let me go here first. Thank you.
I'm going to talk about autism and friendship trauma. I do have notes in front of me, and I'm going to be reading off of them mostly verbatim, because if I don't, I'm going to be making 900 videos and not posting any of them. My My qualifications include I did my undergrad thesis on autistic perceptions of friendship. I have
Cool.
2 years of experience as a counselor with autistic clients. I myself am autistic, and I finished my first year of grad school in counseling next week.
And you have cool
To
hair.
talk about, oh, this is Micah. She's my assistant. My TA, if you will. Anyway, so in order to understand friendship trauma, we first have to understand the difference between how autistic people and non-autistic people communicate, and then we need to understand the difference between how autistic people and non-autistic people define the proper order of steps to follow when establishing a friendship. These unspoken social rules about how it's appropriate to go about making a friend are informed by the difference in communication styles. So autistic people and non-autistic people have inverse communication and processing styles, meaning autistic people are primarily information-based processors. We need as much information as possible so we can use that information to inform how we feel.
Right.
Non-autistic people do the inverse, where they are primarily feelings-based processors, meaning they use their feelings around a situation informed by tone and body language to interpret the information they gather from that situation. So autistic people...
I'm going to pause that for a second. So this is where I would change this a bit, and this is why I have issues with alexithymia. It's not that we don't have feelings. I wouldn't phrase this as feelings. I think it has to be this global configurational thing that I talk about. Ultimately, I think that's what it's going to be, is that they're not using their feelings to figure it out. They're using these relationships that are dynamic, that come as a result of being able to understand global configurational information their entire lives, and that becomes the primary metaphor for social interactions and many other kinds of goals. And this is why we can seem unmotivated, is it's a type of motivation. Yeah.
And so you'd say because people aren't aware of that distinction that you're aware of when trying to understand that dynamic, feelings is the closest thing they're aware of, right?
Yes.
Because obviously when people are in the correct, quote unquote, correct sort of relationship to each other, then they'll have certain like feelings based things related to.
Yes. And so then our experience of feelings in and of itself, the way that we describe emotions, doesn't sound familiar to that process, which is getting talked about when people talk about their feelings. Therefore, they say we have alexithymia as opposed to a global configurational deficit, and therefore the way that we're talking sounds very different. But we have feelings, obviously.
Right. So there would simply be like, it would be impossible for people with global configurational deficits to be able to form the same kinds of emotions as people without that deficit, because of course emotions are formed in the brain, right? So you literally cannot form the same types of things. Like,
right, exactly.
Makes sense.
Exactly. Okay. All right, let's continue.
Use information to figure out how to interpret their feelings, and non-autistic people use their feelings to figure out how to interpret information. This is the first barrier to establish.
And I don't like that, because it's an opposite inverted thing, and I don't think that's what's happening. And I'm critical of opposites as a concept to begin with. It's a flattening of the complexities for one. For two, I just simply don't think it's accurate. So it's like, it's not that we're doing it backwards. It's that, I'm going to rephrase, let me hear her say that one more time, and then I'm going to rephrase, because this is important, because I think my theory matters.
Things around a situation informed by tone and body language to interpret the information they gather from that.
Okay, so the information is put into a global configurational context. That's what we're lacking. We have never been able to see that context. Therefore, there is no experiences of it to reference and cross-reference. There is no experience. It's a kind of blindness. So it's like the same thing as somebody who literally cannot see. They can intellectualize about a sunset, but they've never seen a sunset. They can't compare sunsets. They can't do any of those things. And a lot of social interactions are the comparison of different compositions that you have seen of this social skill that comes from a global configurational awareness that then moves into the realm of interacting with other people and becomes very metaphorical and abstract. So
Instead of merely saying that we are information first processors, we can say that we are unable to globally configure
Yeah.
situations, and
Yeah.
therefore can't do that first,
Yes, exactly.
right? Because you
And
can't do it at all.
yeah, and I'll explain. So what let me give you the background on this. So for people who don't know, because this was a question in the little chat from Ro. So there's two kinds of reasoning that I am juxtapositioning, and again, they're not opposites. They're two strategies, and autistics are left with one. A neurotypical person has both, and it is global configurational reasoning or memory, or local featural reasoning or memory. And these are two kinds of episodic memory. They're autobiographical memory and also sequencing. So basically, in memory science, there's ways that we are able to know what we've done in the past, and we reference those things that we've done in the past to form concepts and ideas about, like, including things like feelings, like what is the meaning of things, right? So it's a way of understanding and interpreting the sense data that we're taking in using our memories. And what I think has happened is there's two kinds of cells that are particularly implicated in this process in memory. One is grid cells and one is place cells. And I believe that autism is actually a problem in the grid cells in the brain, and they do not form or work properly. There's something where that process does not happen the way that it should typically develop, and then we're left with place cells firing without grid cell information. And grid cells is literally a firing pattern of neurons that, when you're in a physical three-dimensional space, and I would argue, and not only me just arguing this, like neuroscientists are explaining this, social skills are actually like a metaphor of being in that three-dimensional space. That's how we have social skills, is we have the embodied experience of moving three-dimensionally. And you have cells in your brain that literally fire in a grid. So like they fire in a hexagonal grid. You can also think of it as triangles, and it pings. So your brain actually has, like, you can watch rats do this, you can watch any animal do this if you study it and put the right little diodes in their brain. It will fire at certain locations, and when you put it all together, they've made a grid. So there's a brain that says, we're in this part of the triangle, we're in this part of the triangle, we're in this part, or I'm looking at this part of the triangle, this part, and this makes a hexagon that is uniform. And that autistic people's don't. But our place cells still work, and there's evidence that people with, or any organism with, because we're not really looking at people yet, compromised grid cells, the place cells are still active. So what happens is we, instead of looking at this global configurational information, are left looking at local featural, so very specific places. And our brains will return to those places over and over again. So you can think of this as our special interests. And I believe that we select them based on recursiveness. That is to say, the things that are the most resilient to change are probably the most valuable to study. Since we can't see the whole information in the environment, we have to pick a piece of information that gives us clues about the environment. If something stays or often repeats in an environment, we can then look at it to infer information about the environment. And I believe that's how autistic people are thinking. So I hope that gives you a good overview. Let me know if there's any questions on that. Yes, it's a spatial memory. It's not even short-sighted. Well, kind of. It's a complete lack of context. So because we don't have the grid cells from day one, we never form context in that way. And therefore it actually is primarily a visual spatial disability, and you can test this as well, where autistic people have certain visual spatial tasks that we do not do normally. We're also better at, randomly, I guess because of this, we're better at Where's Waldo? We have a different eye scanning pattern when looking at visual spatial information, and there's a certain test that you can do where we can't ignore a kind of a distraction. And I think that has to do with all of this. So it's like we really have never experienced this kind of perception to begin with, and that downstream of this are like social relationships. And we can still understand it kind of like conceptually by thinking again from a special interest perspective of, like, here's this one piece of information I can stare at outside of the context of the grid. Literally the grid is not firing, so it's like this embodied, this literal, right? And what's happening is that we have to use the information that we can process, this thing that we're attracted to because it's resilient to the environment, to then make guesses about the environment. And we can do that at very advanced levels of abstraction such that we can create a theory of mind for people who have working grid cells without ever experiencing working grid cells. And I think that's the level of impairment that we actually operate on. And so in the same way, somebody who's never heard before can, if they study sound waves and understand and interact with people, get a conceptual notion of what it must be to hear without ever having the capacity to hear. And I think that's actually where we are, which is a more profound disability than we're giving credit for. Yeah, please check out the terms. Please do.
That's really nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Are we good to keep watching now that I've done my add-on?
What kind of tests were referenced?
The test. So there's a spatial distraction test for autism. I can try to find it. It's
Okay. You should continue with what we're doing.
Yeah, but that exists. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
That situation. So autistic people use information to figure out how to interpret their feelings, and non-autistic people use their feelings to figure out how to interpret information. This is the first barrier to establishing a cross-neurotype connection or a friendship between an autistic and a non-autistic person. The second barrier arises from the difference between how the two neurotypes define the proper protocol for making a friend. Non-autistic people establish a cursory relationship with others through small talk. For non-autistic people, the small talk is not about...
Okay, so I think that small talk is them playing the game of understanding hierarchy, understanding movement along the grid in this abstract social way, and that's what they're actually doing together. And you don't just boil it down to small talk. It's so much more than that, right? So it's like it's an application of a very physical, real skill made by your brain understanding three-dimensional space with grid cells, and then creating social games with that. So it's more sophisticated than what.
So I want to highlight, of course, that things can be more than one thing.
Yeah.
And that for something so central to a species like humans, small talk probably is specifically more than one thing. So
Right.
what she says it is could also be true.
Yes. Yeah. I don't think. Yeah. Thank you for saying that. I think that. Yeah. This is more of a yes and statement because I think what I'm on is true. But thank you.
Language is very bad for distinguishing yes and from but. By default, it sounds like we as autistics are saying but or except instead.
Right.
I think. I've noticed this lately.
Thank you for noticing that. I think I agree with you too. I'm going to listen back to this and also evaluate that in myself.
About the content of what the people are saying. It really doesn't matter what you say, and it doesn't matter because as feelings-based processors, the information isn't really as important as establishing a shared feeling. So,
but it's a shared grid. So that's what she's missing. It's not a shared feeling. It's a shared understanding that you see each other on the grid, which is very valuable because now you can navigate a space together collaboratively. And this is why we're in the way.
Oh, I watched a video about polyvagal theory right after these ones. So what I associated was that this small talk allows you to place yourselves within a safe, place your body in its safety mode. Right? Because when you see a new person that you don't know already, it's going to trigger your is there danger mode, right? Which is a distinct physical way your body reacts. And so it makes sense that when you're in this mode that your brain isn't ready to simply jump into more complicated topics, right? You just want to talk to this person and see if they react in a manner comparable to other people are safe to interact with, right?
Well, and if this person's this might be why we get looked at as crazy or stupid or liars. You're trying to see you're fact checking, does this person see the grid? And then you're trying to you're trying to show them softballs, I think they're selling each other softballs to be like, oh, you see this grid, yes? Okay, well then we can rely on you in the future. And we clearly don't know.
if they say, damn, this weather lately, and the other person says, yeah, it's all because of the politicians and their cabal, right? Like they've misfired the grid.
Right.
And so you know they're not like a typical safe person that you'd expect. And yes, Tara, you can
Yes, please.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, this is kind of like a tons of topics kind of conversation, which is like really awesome. But I don't think I'm gonna be able to just like jump in, so I might have to like put in the chat when I have something to say. Yeah, so I've been thinking a lot about starting relationships and like all of these things that are coming up. And like I have realized, yeah, they say autistics don't like small talk, and we like to jump right in, which in some ways we do. Like if it's about a special interest sometimes, but even then, it depends how people are approaching it. Like as I've gotten deeper into my special interests, I find that just going to any group where people are pursuing my special interest, it's no longer the, oh my gosh, these are my people feeling as it used to be when I was starting out with some of them, because everyone has a different framing of whatever topic or interest, like why they got into it, what it means to them, how they look at it, what about it is intriguing to them right now. And we can't jump right into the depth of it. And yeah,
Right.
like I resonate with what y'all have been saying about how some people use small talk to signal places and social hierarchies, which I don't appreciate. But then sometimes people also use it to kind of figure out where, like, what people are thinking or feeling about a topic. And that I appreciate when it's done without like pushing for too much depth too fast. And when it is done with like pushing for too much depth too fast, that can be even worse sometimes. But we're not, like, because of how normalized the placing people on social hierarchies is culturally, we have less experience with what kind of questions can get to understanding why someone got into songwriting and like what is kind of on their mind in that realm, and maybe using that to open up more gateways to other conversations. But we also might not be able to share the really personal thing that came up for us with our special interest yesterday with someone new, even if they're autistic and they're really understanding and they have some similarities, because like we still have to build a shared understanding and everyone's coming from different backgrounds. And yeah, like looking at Rose Points, there is no one size fits all. But yeah, I've been thinking a lot about like what's a good next question. Not like I've been, kind of noticing what tends to work, but I don't think I'll ever have like go-tos, but just in general, I guess the first step is trying to get a sense of like where people might feel safe going from different kinds of places, like, because as much as I'd like I used to think that I'd want to skip the more shallow kind of things, but now I'm finding that what I actually want to skip is like that global configurational social hierarchies kind of thing, and I want to get into actually talking about topics. And I don't mind I can still benefit from a not as deep conversation about a topic. Like, it might be boring for me if it's all stuff I already know, but usually there's something I learn. And then, there are people who I have a deeper understanding with versus some people, it's more like just learning about different kinds of human experiences from like when they bring up something that's new to me. And so I'm kind of experimenting with not needing to be deep all the time. But yeah, how to get that sense of safety, like both for me to feel safe and for them to feel safe when it is something that's not this cultural norm and kind of people making a lot of assumptions about who's safe based on, what kind of career they have, where they went to school, where they've worked before, when they might be doing those things for a very different reason, and that's not necessarily a signal of safety, versus someone else from a completely different background might be pursuing certain ideas for a more aligned reason with our kind of reasons. Yeah,
I think
that was kind of, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I think from what I just wanted to jump on some of the points that you made. I think that I need to figure out two pieces of information. One, is this person up to modeling and comparing models? So that's what I do.
Yeah.
So are they into that? Do they have any tolerance for that whatsoever? If the answer is no, I'm not really ever going to talk to this person. Like I can kind of pretend to be, whatever I need to be based on, I'm basically going to mask around this person, right? That's just what it is. Or let's say they have some tolerance for modeling. Great. Do they know anything about a model I'm interested in doing that process with at all? And sometimes the answer is yes, and sometimes the answer is no. And I try to leave a lot of room, I think, now. And again, I'm describing this process without having the language until very recently about what I think I'm actually doing. But I believe this is what I'm doing, where I'm assessing if this person can talk to me about models. If they can talk about models, which ones are they interested in? Am I interested enough in those? Do I think they're wrong already? Because that's going to be a problem too, where I might look like I'm debating the person because I already have invested hours in developing this model, and they're going to see it as like maybe hierarchical information or something to do with the global configurational. So is this going to be unsatisfying for both of us for reasons related to this? And if they're neurodivergent, then it gets a little bit trickier because we have a range of things going on there.
Oh yeah, absolutely. A lot of that resonates with the kind of things I'm trying to vet as well. So it's really cool hearing your kind of take. And I hope the word take isn't offensive. Someone said that recently.
Oh, really?
Okay. So, yeah, they had put a lot of work into their theory. And when I used the word take, they felt like I was implying that they were like the tech bros I'm known to be affiliated with, throwing out hot takes about a bajillion things they don't understand.
I see.
So I know there was more context there, but I just wanted to clarify that I do respect how much time and energy you've put into this.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, no, I understand. That makes sense. That vernacular is kind of funny because there is a distinguishing thing there where it's used to mean something more globally, and then also that very specific behavior that's wow.
Right.
Yeah.
This is another autistic person, by the way, but it just goes to show that we still need to develop that sense of safety anyway. And once someone affiliates me with tech bros, they might be kind of looking at me through that lens a little bit. That's just part of being human.
Yep. Are we okay to continue watching the video? We good?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't realize.
No, you're good. You're good. No. I think it's just gonna take a while for us to get through this because I think this is important to work through it and have pauses to talk. So let's watch a little more. And please let me know if everyone wants to add anything or have me pause it, just say so or put it in the chat.
What really matters is acknowledging each other's existence and establishing a baseline feeling of camaraderie and safety. And this is the proper way of initiating a new friendship and establishing an initial connection with a non-autistic person. Over time, as these feelings of safety, connection, and camaraderie grow through the use of small talk, autistic people begin to feel more and more comfortable discussing.
So I think they trust each other's ability to navigate the grid. So that's how I would say that. I'm moving on.
Deeper topics such as their genuine opinions, thoughts, interests, and desires. So non-autistic people start at the surface with feeling, and then they get deeper and deeper over time until they feel comfortable enough to do something as intimate as genuine information exchange. And again, autistic people are doing the same thing, just in the inverse order. Since we're primarily information-based processors and not feelings processors, we start with gathering the
because I think she's wrong, but like, because I think we really have a disability, like we have an impairment. It's not backwards. We have something we literally cannot do. And our strategy to cope with this, I think, is to exclusively like commandeer local featural processing. And that's why. So we'll never understand what they're doing. And the problem with it's not backwards. We are not doing that. And I think that's very important, because otherwise, well, first of all, we're not going to get the accommodations that I think we need, because it's not going to be understood as a disability. It's going to be understood as a something else. Like I think this metaphor is wrong, though I do respect this person and her work. I just think that this probably isn't it, and may create problems, but that's just me.
Information, because the information is what feels cursory to us, and the feelings, sharing feelings with another person, is what feels intimate. So what this looks like in real life, let's say, okay, this is completely unrelated, but okay, I've been making paper dolls for like no reason, and this is like the perfect opportunity to use them and show them off. Okay, this is my neurotypical, this is my autistic. Okay, so let's say that we have a neurotypical, and I feel like this one's autistic. Okay, switch it up. Autistic, non-autistic. Okay, so let's say we have an autistic person and a non-autistic person running into each other in a break room, and the non-autistic person decides they want to try to establish a relationship with the autistic person. Of course, they don't know each other's neurotypes. So the non-autistic person says something along the lines of like, hey, how are you doing today? Using a social script to try to establish a shared feeling of safety and connectedness. The autistic person, not understanding the social script and not knowing how to establish this shared feeling without feeling like their privacy is being invaded and they're doing something that is too intimate to do with someone that they don't know, hesitates, not knowing how to respond. The allistic person notices this hesitation, notices that the autistic person is not putting out the vibe that they want to feel safe and connected with the allistic person, and decides, okay, the autistic person doesn't want to be my friend. From the autistic perspective, this is how that scenario goes. Okay, autistic person, non-autistic person run into each other in a break room. The non-autistic person says, hey, how are you? The autistic person, not understanding the social script, hesitates because they're thinking, okay, my options are engage in a social script that I don't like and I don't understand and I don't feel connected and I feel mostly annoyed. But I'm placating the allistic person. Or I can be honest, which feels more natural to me because I prioritize information exchange, and give them genuine information exchange. However, that information exchange, being how I'm genuinely doing actually in this moment, feels a little...
Okay. I think we're good.
I'm going to talk about autism and
okay, sorry about that.
Arises
I'm
from
back.
The difference between how the two
It's back.
Sorry about that.
based process.
Yeah.
My internet ate a poo.
Yeah.
With the autistic person. Of course, they don't know each other's neurotypes. So the non-autistic person says something along the lines of like, hey, how are you doing today? Using a social script to try to establish a shared feeling of safety and connectedness. The autistic person, not understanding the social script and not knowing how to establish this shared feeling without feeling like their privacy is being invaded and they're...
That's the problem. Without feeling their privacy is being invaded, we just don't know how to do it. Like that's not the issue in my opinion, but yeah.
Doing something that is too intimate to do with someone that they don't know, hesitates, not knowing how to respond. The allistic person, social script, hesitates because they're thinking,
I don't
okay,
remember
my
exactly what the invading privacy bit was, but that's another thread that I was having an interesting conversation with another autistic person about what kind of things feel really personal and intimate to different kinds of people, you know, like the script people versus the like whatever we want to call the other side. And what answer them what we would consider honestly, it's really, really personal. Yeah, I've been thinking about like what kind of variations of how are you might be more accessible, for example. But then that's a whole
Mhm.
I haven't been able to think of anything that would be better in all situations.
So, some of this is a good thing to bring up because like today's topic is self-excluding from disabling circumstances, especially
I
peer abuse. So what I think is happening, it's not that we feel like it's too intimate. It's that when we talk the way that we really think, we have negative social consequences. It's not that we
yeah,
feel vulnerable because this is a vulnerable thing to share. It's because we're literally becoming vulnerable because this
right.
is, yeah, go ahead.
If someone asks me, "How are you?" I self-exclude from answering it authentically, right? Because, you know, because like you said, it's not only do we get bad social reactions, but I'm actually aware in a lot of contexts it's simply socially inappropriate, right? Like if you're at work and someone says how you are, you cannot say, "I feel shitty. I wish I didn't have to be here. Like, I'm just like, I actually kind of want to kill myself." Like, that's just not socially appropriate. And so I I have to self-exclude from an actual meaningful interaction.
I hear all of that layer. And for one, if you're actually feeling that way, then I'm really sorry that you're feeling that
Oh,
way.
is that from these are from past experiences. I don't have to work with
Fine. I figured it likely wasn't, but it's just the kind of thing that I never want to like not say something because I know that sometimes when people are going through stuff like that and they don't have, you know, they don't know like where to bring it up or like when it's just on someone's mind, it might come up tangentially in conversations. And then if it's not responded to, sometimes people feel some kind of way like no one care like I just try to be like extra careful. That's like why I brought that up. But anyway, the thing that I wanted to say was so I see that layer and I relate to it. And my yes answer is that at least for myself, I do also experience this other layer where even if I feel a certain level of safety with the person, if I just don't know them that well, or if I have, you know, other intentions, like, you know, maybe the answer is that I've been feeling not so great. And, you know, maybe even in a way that I'd love to talk with them about someday. But today, I really need this specific information from them to do this thing that I really want to do today. And I know that my chances of getting that are decreased if we go on a tangent about how I'm feeling. Like it might be with my best friend. And I know I also want to know how she's feeling. And you know, so I sometimes might say something like, "Yeah, it's been rough," but then not go into details or say like, "It's been rough, and I'd actually love to talk to you about it sometime if you have more bandwidth." But like after we talk about this other thing, or I might even like be more specific, like, "It's been really rough with my job hunt because I'm running into challenges responding to certain kinds of interview questions. And I'd love to talk about that at some point if you have bandwidth. But first, like, you know, I don't want to take this conversation on that thread right now. Like, there's also that layer. Or, like, even, I can't think of a way to, like, I've been going through a lot and it'd be a lot to explain so I'd rather not right now, or like I'm too tired, you know, to tell you how I'm really feel. Like even if I'm being authentic, I can authentically say that, which is not the typical holistic response, without sharing, you know, this layer of deep vulnerability that I do see as an option that I just might not be feeling like sharing at that moment. If that makes sense.
Like, you have context where you can share that successfully with an holistic person, or does that only after knowing somebody for a very long time? And at that point, are they already accommodating you?
So I see it as two different dimensions. Like there's this one that we've been talking about most of the time about how some people think in this global configurational way, and where my responses are just going to sound unusual to them and maybe derail things in a way where neither one of us might want, or you know, like maybe that doesn't feel like the right time for that conversation because I see that we have a shared goal that we might be able to get to easier if I mask. So there's that. And then there's also this layer of so if I, okay, like for example, I've been going through autistic burnout. And even with another super accommodating person, regardless of their neurotype, um, if they just have no concept of autistic burnout, even though it's how I'm doing, when how I'm doing is this niche thing that not a lot of people know about, or even job hunting with my kind of work, which is unusual on several dimensions, I might give a more vague response just because I know that getting to a level of understanding of what I'm going through would take a lot of back and forth and potentially have a lot of room for misunderstanding. So there it's actually the topic that would be energy intensive and vulnerable to get into, which I might not be in the mood for, even if I don't feel like you know, I need to mask my autistic way of speaking. Those are like two
Yeah,
separate things.
yeah, that
Yeah.
sounds like conversation management in the for the aims of resource management, basically, right? That that like you alter how you would respond in these circumstances because of the details of the person you're in the circumstance with and the outcomes you're seeking.
So yes, and like
Mhm.
to that question, yes. And to the larger question idea of self-exclusion. So the way I perceive this, I see it as self-exclusion when I mask um my autistic traits, or you know, I try to disengage because I feel like I can't be myself somewhere, versus it actually feels natural to me, and it feels like unmasking to, you know, to unmask my energy needs by saying now's not the best time for a certain deeper conversation right now. That actually feels like the opposite to me. So both are kind of um you know, be perceived as disengaging in a way, but one's masking and feeling isolated while the other is unmasking and actually, you know, asking, can you accommodate me by being willing to chat about this later in a time and place that's better for me, or not at all if it's not something that I want to spend the energy going into.
Just leaving the space open too for people who also might want to comment on that. comment. Illicit individuals can't tolerate potentially destabilizing states of being, such as feeling bad, for example. So they perceive. Well, and also I wonder if our feeling bad doesn't make sense in context. And since we've never experienced this, again, I'm arguing for my model pretty aggressively here, and I want to keep caveating that. But if we have never experienced this process that they learn to engage in when they're interacting with each other and even with themselves, like this is like a nonstop process, I think. I don't think it's purely social. I think it's perceptual on a fundamental level, that we are not acting like we're in the same dimension as them, and that the things that we're bringing up might actually be destabilizing because it doesn't make sense. Like we sound crazy, like delusional sort of crazy, like from a perceptual standpoint. And that's my concern, is that we're distressing to people. You know what I mean? Yeah, exactly. Because what we're saying would never happen, or very, very unlikely to happen for somebody who has global configurational reasoning their entire lives, that this just doesn't occur. So then we start doing those things, and maybe sometimes we learn to do behaviors that are more acceptable in general, that more people do no matter what, and then even though we don't understand why they're doing them, since it's usually okay to do that, it usually follows from global configurational reasoning, us mimicking it will be fine. And then sometimes it's not fine because we didn't understand the point in the first place, which was they're just sharing an observation that we don't have the perception of at all. And don't even have we don't have the hardware to do that kind of perception. So that may be alarming to people, that that's even possible. Like, because this is really abstract. Like the model I'm suggesting is really abstract too. And so for somebody to have self-awareness about this would require like neuroscience giving us a really complex view of our own brains that would have been impossible up until now as well. So it's like, I think the level of rejection that we're getting is going to end up like demanding a really sophisticated model, and at least from our perspective, I think that would be valuable. So I'm going to keep advocating for it, but also I appreciate everybody's patience with it because I'm not the best spokesperson. I'm just kind of here stuck, feeling compelled to share what I believe I am seeing from my own amateur research, or at self-taught research. Okay.
I think you're a great
I was going to.
spokesperson, artist.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, go ahead.
No, it's all right. I was simply just going to say that it seems the truth. Jane. To me, it's sort of, I got the impression that it's as though, like, holistic individuals, or at least the other people in my life, they tend to live by these certain esoteric sort of rules and scriptures, and like rituals of sorts, in a sense, where it's expected that you have to sort of like complete steps A through C at certain times to sort of like to then be able to say certain things, to act in a certain way. So then somebody sort of like coming in, they talk about like, there's idioms like, something sort of like came left field, or, off the bat or whatever. It's seen as something that's supposedly like, it kind of implies that communication that comes from like a different dimension of sorts. So maybe that's what it is for him.
And so I like what you said there, and the rules thing is like so to us it's like, oh, they're following these rules and they seem somewhat arbitrary, and sometimes we can follow these rituals and mimic them and be basically under the radar and not detected as strange. But the actual situation is that I think is happening is they're comparing notes on this kind of information that they've been processing their entire lives and have found novel ways to process socially, that they use as various, social tests or just social entertainment. There's all kinds of reasons why they would use the skill that they naturally have, just like somebody who has sight can just paint for no reason, as well as paint to enter a contest, as well as paint to, fix their house. They can do all kinds of reasons for doing the skill, and that they're negotiated together with other people who have sight, and that you can't negotiate it with a person without sight, fundamentally born without sight, because we have no idea what that person would be talking about. And so the issue that we're having here is that we are noticing patterns and we're copying patterns, but we don't understand the underlying logic, because that would have required us to have global configurational reasoning.
Right. And I think something that I find very sort of amusing is that as much as you can try to learn those rituals or those patterns, I think it's like people are conditioned, at least illicit individuals are conditioned to believe that if you slip up, it tends to imply a certain like covert purpose or whatever, right? Usually, right, it's the whole unsafe thing, I think, right? Which gets triggered.
Right. And it could be that in their past experiences, if they've noticed somebody doing that, and these are things that we get accused of, that the person thinks that they're better than them, that they're insulting them, that they're mocking them, that they're delusional, that they're like, all these things can be, it's a pathological person. So we get associated with pathological people, because if somebody can see this global information and something goes awry, and in other circumstances that they've existed around, the explanation is, oh, this person was lying to me, this person was intimidating me, this person is thinking about a completely different hierarchy entirely, and we have like all these sorts of conflicts that can come up when somebody has global configurational information as well, right? So we get labeled with attributes we can't possibly have because of our disability. And we can't defend ourselves either. That's what I'm saying. Because in order to defend ourselves, we would have to prove that we do in fact know the right global configurational information, which we don't, because we are disabled.
Right, and then it goes kind of full circle to the isolation bit.
Exactly.
Right? That's what I was going to say.
Precisely. So how is this maladaptive, right? And then this is the problem that I'm having, is that we don't have phrasing to talk about this quickly and efficiently, and I think we absolutely need it.
Yeah. I have a lot of thoughts on all of that I'll like try and tie up. So yeah, for starters, where is this expectation to be able to phrase this quickly and efficiently coming from? And why? Going back to Rose's point about when you mentioned how people might respond when you mention that you're feeling bad. So I know that most people, at least in American culture, which I was having a conversation with another likely autistic person who brought up that in American culture, even when as an entrepreneur, she's asking people about their needs so she can decide what to build. Like if they want to be able to put a family picture on the wall, instead of that, they mention that they need a hole in the wall. And they're not giving her the info that what they actually need is to put up their picture, or if we're going even broader, what they actually need is to be able to be reminded of their family whenever to have like a place they can go to for that, and then that might open up even more possibilities. And so if someone says something like, I want to be able to
Okay, now that we understand the difference,
have an easy way to be reminded of my family. A lot of people, because if they're climbing this global configurational ladder and they want easy ways to get rewards fast, they would want to know that someone wants a hole in the wall so they can mindlessly put a hole in the wall and not know what it's for and get their payout. And if someone tells them, I want to be able to have an easy way to think of my family, they might view that as annoying, or like, oh my gosh, it's going to be work to like talk through this, which that's how saying you feel bad can sometimes come off to some people. Like they would prefer if you came up with a solution about what they can do single-handedly and give it to them. But the thing is, when we try to do that, that might or might not be accommodating to them. And so a lot of times they'll just be like, no, or go find someone who can give that to you and then keep going. But the thing is, no one might be offering something or have the bandwidth to offer something my ideal way. and like my ideal way might even be unrealistic because it was cooked up in my head without talking about it with anyone else, and therefore less in touch with anyone else's feelings beyond some hypothetical level. Sorry, support, are you trying to say something, or is that background noise?
What are you looking up?
I think it's background noise.
Yeah.
Oh, they're trying to figure out something. I'm gonna give her
Okay.
a mute just for the time being, so that they're not feeling too stuck on the spot. I wanted to say something. So, let me that derailed me. Oh, so in your example, just so I'm following, there's like multiple neurodivergencies possibly interacting as well.
Not necessarily. It could be with anyone. So actually, this is another thing where I think this is along the dimension of like rather than like I think this is more along the dimension of people's rationale for doing things. So I'm actually looking at the categorization of people who are using or trying to use like doing as arriving, which includes masked autistics a lot of time, a lot of them.
Yep.
And I mean, no one's completely unmasked, but versus the local featural, and trying to understand people in a local featural way of like understanding them as much as we need to develop a model and then decide how to interact based on that. I'm trying to like use your language here, Jane.
Well, the problem, let me clarify something with that too, because this will be important. So if somebody has autism, I'm arguing that we cannot model people global configurationally, that's knocked out, that we only build models local featurally, that we don't have the ability to share a model with somebody who uses global configurational reasoning. And so when we communicate to somebody, we can only do a superficial imitation of patterns that we maybe have seen. So we would be doing it as like memorizing, this comes after that, comes after this, and we may have some model of that we've built, but it's not, it's as impairing as saying like you can mix all the paints together without ever seeing any colors whatsoever, but that's very limited, and to be able to do that will require a completely different approach. So I do also want to just like note that in my framework, and this wouldn't be true for other disabilities, and we've talked about this before, where there may actually be like a line here where some autism is actually this phenomenon, and I believe that's what I'm experiencing in my brain, and that getting more specific with what our disability is part of the problem of why we're having such a hard time finding accommodations, as well as this burden that's currently on autistic people and the entire neurodivergent community to fix all of our disabilities when some of them are mutually exclusive. It's kind of like you wouldn't expect somebody who's congenitally blind to solve the problem of somebody who's congenitally deaf, but that's kind of what's happening.
So, all right, two different points there. Yeah, I resonate with all of that. I guess I'll respond to that last sentence like real quick. Yeah, I guess it's like two different things. So the kind of problems that I see being solved in spaces that are open to all kinds of neurodivergent folks tend to be like more specific problems where one solution might work for many, as opposed to understanding the underlying root of one form of neurodivergence. So like, working from home would help lots of types of neurodivergent people. Not everyone, but or just, okay, what can more understanding look like in general? Versus if you're developing a model for autism at the neurological level, then like hearing about dyslexia, like that some things might click, but not nearly if we had a space that was very varied, it might be hard to find the people to talk to
yeah, well, I guess my concern is we're limited by our material reality, and that there is probably a material reality to autism that may limit my efficacy in specific places, and that's sort of the issue. Is that like, does that make sense? Where it's like I think I actually have a material disability that is profound, and therefore I cannot interact with some material substances. And that's what's happening. Even though we usually talk in more metaphorical terms, we're ultimately atoms running around that have certain relationships, and I think I have some relationships of atoms in my brain that just doesn't exist. And that's what's creating all these like really nuanced social problems. So it's hard because I don't think we're in the right spaces and that's why I advocate for this. I don't think we're in the right spaces to like pin down what is the material difference, and then we end up with these kind of like woo-woo spaces. I mean, even in like the tech spaces, they have a lot of that too, where it sounds more like gurus than dealing with a physical disability that happens to be in the brain.
Right. Yeah. I hear all of that. Yeah, to kind of tie up the thread about people responding in not great ways when we say we're feeling bad. So yeah, part of it is that they don't get it. Like why? And then part of it is that we don't understand it that well ourselves, and then how to explain in a way that, yeah, I think your words, Jane, were quick and efficient. And then there's also the issue of like what different people consider a quick and efficient response, where some people are like, come up with the solution yourself and give it to me. And there are so many things that can go wrong there versus, all right, interesting, like there's something that I'm doing isn't working for you. Let's have a conversation.
This is helpful because it helps me to clarify my meaning. So when I said quick and efficient, this is why I need to not have new problems. So if I'm telling people about my existent problem and then that fails to communicate what the problem is, and instead there is now a new problem of this person interpreting it to mean something else entirely, or you know what I'm saying? So it's like I'm trying to communicate it because I would like the problem to be addressed successfully. And if it's not clear and efficient in this current environment, I'm going to have new problems, or even like a problem that I've faced again and again and again that still doesn't have a solution. And I'm not getting any closer to the original problem being dealt with either. Now I have exponential problems. So I think that's more what I mean. My meaning is there.
Yes.
Yeah.
I hear all that. Yeah, that yeah, I'll keep this one quick, but that actually is something that I've been thinking about a lot with my dilemma of when to bring things up. Because I do feel like if I don't have my story straight and a certain level of understanding of them and what my might or might not be able to convey to them, how might work, how might not, if I bring things up quote unquote too soon, it can, yeah, cause more problems than I can handle at a time when I'm already asking for accommodations because my needs aren't being met.
Right, exactly. Yep.
I think holistic people talk about reading the quote-unquote room, right? Before you kind of spring in to kind of ask them something, right? Even though you might have needs, and then those needs kind of grow over time as they keep not getting met. I find it very difficult, you see, to kind of still find that inning because it kind of grows in size. Then there's almost never really kind of a point to then be able to bring it up unless you're kind of at a specific, I suppose, place, down the whole rituals and like the rules, that you've spent enough time with the person to feel safe enough to do so. But often there's not really anybody to be able to do that.
Oh my gosh, yes. And long enough that they feel safe to hear it from you, which I find in a lot of employment settings, the norm, especially.
Right, to hear it, to actually listen to you, right, and to give space to it.
Yeah. Yes. And part of the reason I am feeling displaced from my home in the Midwest, and I've been thinking seriously about moving to the San Francisco area, is because the norm here is to build a relationship with your boss for, 6 months if you're really good at navigating this stuff and probably not autistic. Otherwise, a year or two or more before you can have certain kinds of conversations with them, which means that for those 2 years, perform at my best.
Thing about that too is like the way that these social environments emerge, we don't understand the logic of it either. So it's like we have to wait long enough for them to hear it, right? And then when is that? We don't know. We whereas I think the fun is being able for that could be 3 seconds from now, that could be 50 years from now, right? If you navigate with this global configurational social information, that's how they're doing it, is just making the decision collaboratively that now it's 50 years and now it's 2 minutes, and that we can't participate in that at all. And that's what we're being tested and rejected for, is our ability to do that at all. So we're actually in a very weak position compared to this person in terms of the power dynamics. They can decide when it is whenever. We never get to decide that because we're being tested for our ability to do global configurational reasoning, and we'll always fail.
Right, and they typically don't tell you, you know, like specifically that you've missed the window, as it were. And I think that's sort of like this feeling of shame that I was thinking upon, like, because I read something, I think from like I think also from like a neuroscientist, and they were saying about how the system of like the shame cycle, which then goes into self-isolation, you know, comes from these feelings, and these feelings are of feeling wrong. So maybe for us, it's like feeling wrong that we can't, you know, that we can't understand the global configuration, right?
Well, and if I think what could be restorative, if my model is correct, is knowing that it's not that they're not telling us on purpose. They don't know that anybody would need to be told. They don't know that this is a skill that people cannot have. They have no concept of that, and their entire world is so dependent on this that it's as natural as breathing. So it'd be like us walking and being like, we don't breathe air. And then they'd be like, I've never had to solve the problem of someone breathing air. You must be kidding. What are you doing right now? You must be breathing air. You're not dead. And then we have to explain how we're breathing some other molecule. Like, you know what I mean? Like, we breathe carbon dioxide or something. But like, that's too literal of a weird example. But to see what I'm saying, where it's like, then like, if we can understand.
No, I get you.
Yeah, like that dynamic, maybe it can relieve us of some of the problems that we have, that we've internalized. However, we're still going to be in a real material danger relative to this person because they have a skill and ability that our world is structured around, that they're constantly negotiating with, that we just cannot see, perceive, or have any ability to form a concept of because it's a neurodevelopmental disability.
Right, because it's like you would have to, so you would first have to successfully communicate the fact that you know, you're impaired in this way, and that you genuinely simply cannot like, you know, you don't see the world in the same way, right?
Right.
You're literally unable to perceive this model.
Yeah.
And then they would have to want to somehow play around with that, you know, maybe, as you say, you know, give accommodations perhaps. Because I think I've always had the question of, well, is it not simply just a matter of willingness to give enough time and space to just listen perhaps to, like, you know, what model a person has, how exactly they perceive the world, and then maybe, you know, do actions to perhaps, you know, fulfill some of their needs, right?
Yeah, and I think our current society, I'm suspicious that it's actually taking away the ability to understand what I am talking about. That if you do a lot of global configurational hierarchical activities with each other, that you will not develop the skills that I am talking about. That you need to have really good abstract reasoning, that you need to be able to do what we have to rely on, which is local featural processing, to even mess with models of what our brains actually are as autistic people, which has implications for the models of all brains, because it's in contrast to a neurotypical brain. So you're demanding somebody not only just change how they think about us, but we are asking them, can you change how you think about all brains? And you're going to use a skill that you don't use very often, that I'm very good at using, that you might even feel resentful that I'm good at. And now we're going to get in a fight because you're going to say that I think I'm smart. And oh, look, but you're so disabled. And then now they're bullying me again, right? It's back to you live with your parents, you smart loser. So this is the problem. Like, we need to be able to communicate to people who are willing to do this exercise that I'm saying, that like, hey, I didn't pick the situation, but I think this is what the situation is. And are you willing to use the kind of information that I deal in, right? The only kind of information do you want that? And if you don't, can you leave me alone? Because that's going to be, I think, like, that's the line for us, is like, hey, if you don't want that, are you going to exploit the fact that I have a disability to make yourself look good? Because you can use me as a fall guy, a scapegoat, an example in your global configurational thing. You can basically use me as a way to look impressive to other people by laughing at me because I can't do the global configurational. It makes you look good. And I think that's also why we end up with people that are not socially skilled targeting us. So we see some of the worst of people, and then you get a lot of resentment from the autistic community towards quote unquote neurotypicals, when really we've had a lot of people with poor social skills, antisocial, but I think they still have global configurational reasoning, and they use that to bully us to get some esteem in that global configurational game that we can't play.
Yeah, I mean, I've also experienced it not being so different, even from people who do have pretty good social skills, because I think ultimately, then it's a matter of if they're going to go down the path of, more resistance, right, to do something like this for us. Because otherwise, most people have so many tools to just, simply deny things, right? Can just make assumptions or just simply kind of delude themselves into what kind of like reality is, to, in a form that's more convenient to them, because we're still kind of minority compared to the vast majority of the population. Although I'm not so sure exactly what the percentages are, between autistic and autistic individuals. But I was going to ask a question. So is this proven in neuroscience? As people get older, is it true that like they're less capable of abstract thinking?
I don't know. I am not familiar with that. I wouldn't be
Mhm.
surprised. Cognitive decline is in regions that are impacted by abstract reasoning. I don't know what that looks like for somebody who relies on it more than the average person. So if somebody's trained more in abstract reasoning, I don't know what that looks like. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a general decline, because the regions that go along with just degeneration also have to do with that. Like, that's why memory is related to this also. So abstract reasoning and memory are connected, and there's like a pretty well documented memory decline. So I wouldn't be surprised. I haven't personally seen that or read anything specific about it, but that
Because I
sounds
remember I've read some
plausible.
things just about like fewer neural pathways as you get older, or at least that they're damaged, or they can't sort of like obviously function as well. So
Yeah.
you would then kind of assume that people then would be less open to sort of like abstractly thinking, let's say, new trains of thoughts, right? Consider new models, because then people will just simply be doing things as they've always done them for the sake of convenience. And then as you get older, you're less physically capable to do things.
Yeah.
So I think it's like the sort of people that would need to help us, like how do I put it, age window would be quite small, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we got a study. Thank you. Interpreting Proverbs by the capacity to interpret Proverbs is strongly associated with education and with. See, this is what I'm saying. The capacity to interpret Proverbs. So I think there's an education issue, and it would be hard to separate our environment and the issues of what pressures are put on people right now versus natural decline. So I don't, but I do think that people in certain positions that we would need help from probably haven't learned great abstract reasoning when they were younger to begin with. I think it's declined in its esteem in our culture, even, which is alarming, even though there's definitely resources that you can expose yourself to improve abstract reasoning, but it's not being taught well or talked about. And like abstract math is not taught early enough is a good example of this, because that's like part of the issue is that the school system doesn't know the importance of this. And I don't think it was important to like a capitalist framework, like in that we're like supposed to be factory workers and follow a protocol like that. Like following sequences and protocols, I think, is a global configurational skill, which also might be why we're having more problems with employment as autistic people in the first place, is that we may have a culture that's exacerbating this problem of people not having good abstract reasoning. So then when you get to cognitive decline, we may have just like stacked the deck so much that that's more what we're seeing. I wouldn't know how to separate that, and it would be dope to study it though. But again, then we would have to argue for that, right? Like we'd have to argue for like this is actually a really important and real thing to study because it has implications for autistic people for one, and we need to know this information. We need to form this argument that this kind of model or something like my model or better is happening, and then we need to enact legislative changes. This eventually what we actually need is like constitutional recognition of our disability that then gives us access to the accommodations that are appropriate for our disability. And I think right now that requires such a high level of abstract reasoning to even start to talk about, that we're going against our culture. And I don't know, that's a really good question, like what's happening on a neurobiological level with like the culture, like the chicken and the egg problem, right? Of like what's happening with cognitive decline and what's happening with education.
So I have a couple points to that where I definitely think we need legislative change for a lot of things, including why is everyone expected to work 40 or more hours a week now when half the population used to do housework and take care of kids while the other half did that, which was also not great, but now the current is also not great. Like, why is the norm not working 20 hours a week? And I feel like there are a lot of economic factors happening that things are kind of getting worse and better at the same time. And I'm kind of optimistic in some ways. So like I feel like things have been getting worse in terms of how fast people are expected to learn new procedural scripts since the 08 recession and like the work world getting more lean and layoffs getting more common and stuff. But then on the plus side, because of that, a lot of people are thinking more in terms of developing abstract reasoning type skills to build a career. But unfortunately, there isn't much education that actually teaches that.
Right. Yes.
But the demand is there.
Well, but then I think people
so-
are faking it. That's my concern, is like even in your tech situation,
Yes.
I think a lot of them are completely full of shit and they're saying they're doing data analytics, but I'm like, they couldn't work their way through a level, 101 stats class to save their lives. Okay, just not even happening. Like if it was do stats or be eaten by a shark tank, they're dead. So like, but they have to graduate from Harvard because mommy and daddy have to donate to Harvard next year. They have to upkeep this social hierarchy, and therefore these men are really brilliant people. And I'm like, this is the emperor has no clothes. There are so many warnings of this, and I think people should look at The Wizard of Oz again. I've said this a bunch of times. It's a feminist allegory that like there is just a little man behind the curtain because we established a certain standard and said, oh, the highest, best qualified people will go here. And then we created an impossible situation for anybody competent to end up there. So that the bar gets lower even as our access to these skills becomes somewhat unstoppable. Like, I don't know why I have good abstract reasoning. If I'm being completely transparent, nobody meant for that to happen. So I just got lucky. And I think a lot of us are getting lucky, and I want to push that forward. But since I don't know how it happened to me, I'm also kind of flying blind in this, just saying like, okay, and I think I'm like the bottom tier of it. I don't think I'm good at it. I think I'm better at it than other people. And that's just a problem, that I'm better at it than people who you probably are running into, that have major degrees from major universities and are running around saying that they should be ruling the world and are the great thinkers of our time, when it's mostly exploitation of people who are coders and other aspects of, like, the software is kind of doing the work for them at this point. So it's frustrating because I don't have to have like a deep knowledge of tech to see that social dynamic. Tech is just what was popular, so that's where those kids had to get funneled. Before, they would have been doing stocks, or there would have been something involved with the law. They would have maybe been politicians. Now more of them are moving over to tech because that is the social hierarchy that they are born into. And so there's a serious problem there.
I resonate with all that. And I like to be optimistic that the system is going to collapse on itself within the next decade, because I just don't see how it couldn't. But then again, I don't understand global configuration, so maybe they'll come up with some.
Right, they can make up a new thing, right? They can keep playing the game at a higher level of convolution. And that's what's scary about it, is like the social reality can keep getting more convoluted, and maybe that's fun for people to keep playing at. Maybe that's hard mode, to be the most convoluted nonsense game of telephone social reality, which is maybe what we've entered, and that's scary and bad, because then we have to run in potentially being the person saying like, oh, the emperor is not only naked, but the emperor has painted on him, look at how much clothes I have on, and this is beyond parody. Like that's what's on body paint on their body.
Yeah, I hear that. In my interactions, I do meet more and more people who are disillusioned with the system, especially young people, autistic or not. So that makes me optimistic. And I know that I'm also exposed to a ton of what you're saying, and I try to remind myself that it's a biased sample, and that this minority that thinks they should be ruling the world is just being very vocal. And I try to believe in the strength in numbers, and that number of people who are disillusioned is much higher than the now 3-ish% of people who are identified autistic.
Yeah. And we need the disillusioned
yeah,
people. I think this is like getting to a bigger issue, but it would help autism. It would help autistic people. We need the disillusioned people to know, now learn abstract mathematics, like learn abstract logic and math, because this is the only way out for you and us. And also, like, these people that you think are so much smarter than you are not. They can't do this stuff. If they could do this stuff, they would freeze in their tracks, because what they're doing is ridiculous.
There's a bit of a hurdle though from the. I was just going to say quickly, Enigma, that like, isn't it inherent within disillusionment itself that there's kind of a bit of a lack of motivation, right? Because if people kind of are, I feel like there's an atmosphere or an era these days of what is it called? Doomsaying, I guess, or just simply talking about how terrible like the future is going to be. That a lot of people, even if you were to tell them to try out different things, they typically prefer to wallow in the misery of the moment as opposed to doing something about the situation, which is my experience, what I tend to find among other people who are disillusioned.
Well,
yeah. That's like a learned helplessness, but also this is why I'm kind of advocating for this model of autism. I think it's a kind of motivation to be focused on local featural, and it's not being incentivized in our culture. So even though I am obsessed with these things and I sat around studying and reading, and I'll continue to do so, nobody is paying me to do this, right? Nobody's going to give me money for that. People will give me money for going to Trophy Island and getting the trophy and passing the finish line and doing global configurational stuff, and even doing it for stuff that I find degrading, but my society says, no, but that's where we put the trophies, so go degrade yourself. So we have a problem here where there's no financial reward, and in order to continue to do this kind of study, you need to have leisure.
So we have a really serious problem there. At the very least, the internet is somewhat liberating in that, like, you can study anywhere, but then we need to convince people to study anywhere, and we need to then convince people they're a lot smarter than they think they are. Because I think that holds people back, is thinking that they can't do this kind of abstraction, or that I'm full of shit. You know what I mean? And some people have misogynistic issues too, so they'll hear a woman introduce this topic and then they'll reject it because they have their sense of identity from believing that they're in some hierarchical relationship with women. So that's another problem. So I think there's a lot of issues that are compounded right now, and I'm optimistic in that, like, if I can convince enough people to think and then think again and then think again and think again, they might stumble into the process of cultivating abstract reasoning just from that alone, just poking them enough times.
What could also be, what could be of consolation to a lot of people, I would say, is if you think about it, like a lot of the great innovations, right, and inventions in the past, right, they kind of also came in at the work of people who were not paid for it. Sometimes that they actively went against convention, to the cost of their own lives. Sometimes, actually, I think, who am I thinking of? Say like Nicholas Copernicus, right? When he kind of founded the heliocentric model, right? That went against like the sayings of the church at the time, which was a huge risk for him.
Yes.
But then at the same time, like that kind of paves the way for the betterment of like millions in the future. So
yeah, and then what
I
should tell people, like, there's a really good example I was going to share about this. There's two girls in a high school in, I think it's Virginia, and it's a black all girls school, and for a competition for math, there was a bonus question that asked to offer a proof of the Pythagorean theorem using trigonometry. And this has never happened before. And both of them did it independently in different ways. So now we have two proofs, and this has never happened. And for like thousands of years, people have been looking for a way to do this using just trigonometry alone to prove the Pythagorean theorem, and these two girls did it because they didn't stop. They just took 2 months and were like, nope. They just nobody told them they couldn't, and the school told them that they can, they have unknowable potential. They taught them growth mindset, by the way, psychological concept to know and learn about. That's Carol Dweck's theory, and I think it's really good. And yeah, so we need to influence people to stay on things. And that's, I think, what local featural predisposes you to do. And I think that explains autism. That explains our special interest. That explains it. So then when you talk about autism as like, oh, they're obsessed with the topic, and there's lots of really negative ways that this is described in psychology, or has been described, like purposeless repetition.
Very infantilizing, right?
Yeah. And it acts as if we're compulsively doing this with no reason, and there's no value to it, when this is almost conclusively why humans succeed at all, is that we start to realize something has a property that is resilient, and then you look for it and look for it and look for it and look for it and look for it, and you test it and test it and test it. You're trying to destroy your own hypothesis when you're testing it. So you're looking for resilient things, and that takes a certain kind of behavior that I'm trying to encourage in other people, that I think autism forces you to use. And if it's cultivated in autistic people, it can be cultivated in any people. That I think it's probably accessible to a lot of people, even on levels that maybe have intellectual impairments. There's ways to do this, but we're not teaching people it. So that's where I'm at with it. It's like, I'm passionate about it, but I also don't know, while I see it, what the hell we're supposed to be doing. All I got right now is I'll just like vomit this out. So hopefully it's helpful. Dweck, read her book.
Yeah, it is. Apologies.
Yeah, Carol Dweck. Just read Growth Mindset. Mindset. The book is called Mindset, and there's some interviews with Carol Dweck. I would go to her first. She has one student. I forget her name. It's like Heidi. It's an H name. She also has a book that's a good continuation of it, and both of those are layperson friendly. Mindset is a little more technical, but not intimidating at all. You'd be no problem reading
Mindset, and the author is, did you say Carol Werbeck?
Carol Dweck, and she.
Oh, Dweck.
Yeah,
I see it.
Yep. And she's the neuropsychologist that developed the theory. So it is.
Sweet. Thank
Yeah,
you.
she's awesome. She's great. Hey, you want to keep watching this video? We're halfway through the first one, and I'm gonna try my damnedest to get through this during the stream, so let's give it a shot. Okay, interrupt me if we need to.
You're thinking, okay, my options are engage in a social script that I don't like and I don't understand, and I don't feel connected, and I feel mostly annoyed. But I'm placating the autistic person. Or I can be honest, which feels more natural to me because I prioritize information exchange. And give them genuine information exchange. However, that information exchange, being how I'm genuinely doing actually in this moment, feels a little too intimate and personal to share with someone that I don't know, and also I know the autistic person doesn't actually want me to share. So I'll go with the social script because that's what's easiest and most comfortable in this setting. Yeah, I'm doing good. How are you doing? Yeah. See ya, Okay, now I'm gonna do that same thing again, but from the autistic person initiating the friendship so that we can see how the autistic person interprets the autistic initiation. Okay, again, autistic person, non-autistic person, running into each other in a break room. The autistic person this time decides they want to try to be friends with the autistic person. So the autistic person says something along the lines of, I don't like the coffee here. My preferred coffee is this specific flavor from this brand because of this reason. The autistic person is going to interpret this as wildly socially inappropriate because the autistic person has first not established a shared feeling of safety and connectedness, and they've jumped right into feeling like deep and connected, wanting to share like real genuine opinions and feelings without showing the autistic person that they are safe and cool enough to actually share their real genuine opinions with. So the autistic person hesitates, not knowing how to respond. The autistic person notices the hesitation, notices they've engaged in a social faux pas, and feels really awkward and doesn't know how to respond. The autistic person feels the awkwardness, it feels awkward themselves, maybe says something in response, and then they go their separate ways. So how does this all tie back to autistic friendship trauma? Well, autistic people are people, right? And humans as a species are very, very social. We enjoy socializing with others. And in order for us to be healthy in mind, body, and spirit, we do need to have some kind of connection with other people. But because...
Okay, then you have to ask why. So I think the missing step here is also why. Why do we feel that way? Because we need safety. And I'm saying that we can't offer safety to people because we have a disability in the main kind of information they exchange to check about offering safety to each other. We are not giving them that. And they are not giving us what we need for safety because we are relying on a very specific kind of information that sometimes they'll use. And a lot of times they won't because they use the other one, which they're testing to see how we're doing at it just innately, not on purpose, but because that just is a natural part of communication. So we're pro-social because we have a lot of behaviors, but I want to boil it down to I think safety is key and that we aren't actually safe. And they are also not getting actual safety from us. So it's true what's happening, and that's why we end up self-excluding. Okay, all right.
Because of all of these barriers in communication between the two neurotypes, it's really difficult for autistic people to make friends with people that aren't also autistic because it takes a very
communication. It's that we are not exchanging the kind of information they want or need. We are not hearing the requests for the kinds of information they want or need. And likewise, we're also kind of doing the same thing. It's kind of like, it's not like an inverse, it's basically the same problem, is that, and we have a bigger problem because we are the one with a disability. So we're missing information that the world has structured all kinds of interactions and circumstances around and structures around. So we're having a serious problem all the time. So I don't think it's trauma. That's where I get frustrated with this. I don't think we're traumatized. I think we're super fucking disabled.
very open and
Right.
accepting.
I think it's like similar in
non-autistic
effect to
person.
speaking a different language. Someone.
Yeah, that works a lot better to use that metaphor. So it's like it's not even a barrier to communication. It's like, yeah, it's. I mean, it is a barrier. It's in a sense, yes, there's a barrier to communication. But the first thing we need to communicate about is I'm disabled, not. I just wouldn't use the phrasing that she learned. But I also think differently about the whole situation. Okay, all right, I'm going to shut up and I'm going to try to, there's only like a minute and a half. Okay.
To be willing to look past the social faux pas of the autistic person in that beginning stage of friendship.
Okay, no, sorry. It's not looking past, it's accepting the fact that this person is disabled and is going to say nonsense gobbledygook if you try to tell them, if you try to make them exchange information that we can't process and have never processed and have no way to really know what the hell you're doing. So if that's what you expect from somebody and they're autistic, it's just not, it's never going to happen. You can never work with this person. But clearly there's other kinds of information people value, because a whole bunch of people would hear me speaking and be like, oh wow, I don't think you sound autistic, or you don't sound disabled, like, or or like they would say it nicer than that. They'd be like, oh wow, but you sound so smart. I'm like, yeah, okay, great, cool. Abstract reasoning, as it turns out, is an awesome failsafe if you have autism. So can we work with that, since that's the thing that I can do? Similarly, please don't ask somebody who's congenitally blind to do things that require sight. Don't fucking do that. Like, don't do that. That's the, yeah, okay.
Not only do they have to be willing to look past and accept autistic violation of the non-autistic social script of how to go about making friends, they have to be willing to be open and accepting of autistic traits in general. And a lot of non-autistic people simply are not capable of that. So autistic people go throughout their lives repeatedly trying and failing over and over again at establishing genuine connections.
So I think this is the problem. So I would say, like, we don't know what we have to offer. We should say we have to offer local featural reasoning. We can do that still. In fact, we've had to do it so much that we're really good at it, and we can do it quickly for you if you find that of service. Hi, Carpe. So then we have something to offer to people that seems useful, and then we can do a pro-social action, and we can work collaboratively to the capacity that we can. But we're not going to experience the exchange of global configurational information, and we kind of have to convince people that exchanging abstract information about local featural processing is also valuable, which they already believe. They already think that's true. We just have to, like, say that's the kind of information we are able to offer as autistic people. The end. Like, we can't paint you a picture, and we can do this. Okay, I'll finish the video, and it's 1 more minute. I can do this.
Connections with others and making friendships that last long term. Autistic people tend to have a long history of feeling abandoned or betrayed by their friends because their friends are not able to tolerate their autistic traits long term. And there are cases when, of course, like non-autistic and autistic people are simply not compatible in their interests or their lifestyles to be friends. But in situations where autistic people and non-autistic people are able to establish some kind of long-term friendship, let's say 3 or more months, autistic people often experience repeatedly the allistic person getting fed up with their autistic traits and cutting their friendship off suddenly and without explanation, leaving the autistic person feeling betrayed, abandoned, and like others are not trustworthy enough to build relationships with. In my next video, I'd like to give a demonstration of what that friendship implosion looks like from both perspectives to try and give autistic people who have had that experience at least some kind of closure.
Hold on.
From there, I'll talk about what it looks like when we talk about this trauma in therapy.
Okay, so I know I'm going to have disagreements, but okay, so I want to go back here and say that what she was saying at the very end there, let me just scroll back for a second. Oh yeah, not being able to tolerate. They cannot tolerate our disability. They don't know that we have one, and I think this is what's important. I understand the value of saying traits, but the traits are a manifestation of the disability. They have a problem with the disability, not the traits. If the traits were put into the context of having the ability to see global configurational information, it would be fine, because they care about the global configurational exchange, and we are getting in the way because we can't exchange that information. And if we look like we could exchange that information, or we accidentally oversold and made it sound like we could do that, and then all of a sudden it seems like we're withholding that information or doing this on purpose, or that we're stupid, they're going to not understand this is a disability. And what the actual analogy is, they're hanging out with somebody who is congenitally blind, congenitally deaf, and not realizing that they are, and then continually expecting them to behave as somebody who does not have that disability. And this is the problem. And this is why I have issues with sometimes with like the TikTok world of this, because it's very I think it's like it's not grounded in this material fact that I think is the actual situation with us. Not that we can't have poetic language around it. That's beautiful and wonderful, and yes, and I'm an artist, but that it's unhelpful because I think the framing is going to be not helpful. I think it's going to create additional problems. It's not going to get, this is the same thing, it's not going to get to the root problem that I'm concerned with, which is addressing the disability, making sure people know we have this disability, and then building environments and interactions that are successful, that we can succeed in circumstances that are not disabling. And this situation is not going to, I don't know, it's not going to lead to that, or this framing is not going to lead to situations that are less disabling, in my opinion, or at least not sustainably so, because the model is wrong. The model may be, a model doesn't have to be perfect to be functional. So this may be functional, but I have concerns. Okay. Should I keep going? This is the second one.
I was going to raise a
This
wee
is
little
another
point
video
there.
Go for it.
Or actually, I just wonder, because if these next ones deal specifically with trauma, I've actually listened to the video that we just finished, but I haven't listened to the other ones. But I had my sorry, just to situate, I guess I can ask about this because I had the second round of my autism assessment, which was the concluding one relatively recently, right?
Mm-hmm.
And just for context, I'm 26 when I had it. I didn't get it, very early on, for example. So it's just interesting when, Lilith mentioned, where is the line here between trauma and autism, how they maybe intersect, because I had my assessment, right? Now I had some issues where I couldn't kind of bring in my parents to write kind of like those informant questionnaires. There were like 75 questions, and they were all kind of very specific, right? Because they're kind of were the people who abused me and the reason why I kind of had to leave home.
Yeah.
I couldn't get that, so I did my best, as well as lots of medical like documents from different groups and people that I work with. Now they had those, I had those assessments, those 2 hours, in each, and they asked me lots of questions. They were confused as to why I was interested in specific things and whatnot. But then ultimately, in the end, they were like, so the decision was that it was inconclusive, because they said that they couldn't determine exactly what was the intersection between trauma, and then I'm also diagnosed with ADHD. And then what seemingly seemed to be very sort of like strong autistic traits based on the DSM-5 criteria. So I'm kind of like, what am I to do in this case? I'll try again, but then like when I have supposedly a complicated case, like they put it, like how on earth am I supposed to, how are they going to make, and what's the word, make sense of it basically? What expectations am I supposed to have? Because maybe they're not doing their job properly, or like, it just left me a bit lost.
Yeah, no, exactly. So they're basically saying like, we see a pattern here that we associate with multiple causes, and they're not able to rule in or out what the cause is. And I think part of that is they don't understand what causes autism. And and in fact, when you get discussions about what causes autism, they're not even talking about that. Usually the discussion is like, oh, what foods caused it, what genes caused it, what environmental factors caused it, what is it, so like I get really frustrated because I'm like, how many discrete conditions are we talking about? I think I have one thing that autism refers to, and that's the best language I have to talk about it, but the it is in my brain, and I think it is a very real structural material change. So then if you're saying that you can create the same structural material change with trauma, how? You have to, and does all trauma create the same? Like, this is very frustrating because they're not giving you a sense of what to do. They're just saying like, oh, you could be this, but they don't have a lot of resources anyway. So if it makes you feel any better, like when I got my assessment and diagnosis, I was assessed and diagnosed by somebody who was a specialist in Asperger's and could deal with assessing adults who did not get diagnosed as children. and was kind of doing his push-ups on the new literature on women and was able to identify me that way, right? So he got very interested in women on the spectrum, and if he had not have done that, maybe I wouldn't have gotten my diagnosis either. So I had to go through that process and just got lucky that this person was looking at literature that was current. So the problem that we're having right now is one of the actual substance people are studying is not being named. And I think partly it's because we have a society that broadly fails disabled people and neurodevelopmentally disabled people. And the easiest thing to say is, oh, sorry, guys, you're all special sunflowers, but do nothing to actually address the material problems that we're having. So I get pissed off at that because I'm like, well, the material problems that we have may require radically different solutions because the actual cause, like what is autism, what is trauma, could be counterindicated for certain interventions. So if I don't know what the hell it is, how am I supposed to do any better in a society that already has statistically proven to underemploy, unemploy, and kill early people with my same diagnosis, right? So that's not reassuring.
Yeah. It's exactly that. It's exactly as you say it. I mean, in this case, like the guy was quite a bit older as well. I got the strong, basically, impression that what he was assessing on and the models, they were like it. I feel like the last literature that he read on the topic must have been from some while ago, and then
Right.
he was looking at specifically, kind of like how it manifests in kids, and then that's kind of what I was in that first assessment, in that first round, kind of pissed off because, well, surely there's more you could see. Even because I've read over, like, say, like even the DSM-5 criteria, even from that alone, like you can sort of like look for, you can assess those as well. But that was not brought up at all. And then because I would get agitated and I would get confused by what they were asking, they would then get confused as well as to why I was getting like anxious, right, around the whole situation. And it feels a bit fruitless. Yeah.
In the comment, I wanted to address a thing that Carpy said and also that Jamie was saying. So Carpy was saying this almost sounds like the other end of Dunning-Kruger. The most common understanding is that some people are too ignorant to know how ignorant they are. The other end is people who are too able to realize how able they are and thus can't understand how or why others are not as able as they are. And this is, yeah, like this is, yes. So we end up with a situation where we have a disability and people who do not have that disability are not understanding what the world looks like without the ability, and we're trying to explain it to them while having abilities that they thought were exclusive to them. They thought our intelligence was exclusive to them, and I'm like, no, I have this disability and I also have your thing that you call intelligence. So we're having a conflict there, and then we have some form of prejudice towards neurodevelopmentally disabled people, so much so that I'm even concerned about the language of autism in people who are advocates who probably share the same condition as me, where we're like, well, we're not going to call it a disability, we're going to call it traits. We're going to say all these things. I'm like, no, stop, hold on. What's so shameful about being disabled? Why should I be ashamed of that? That didn't take away from me this thing that you guys call intelligence. So maybe the issue is that it's difficult for people without this disability to imagine your brain operating as successfully as an autistic person's brain still can. And this can be true for other kinds of disability as well. And you don't want to create this weird sort of like, how do I explain this? This sort of like romanticization or like freak show. I'm sorry. Let me just put it where it's at. This freak show display of the person with a disability that still does something amazing, right? That's not what we are. We want to participate in society.
Else, Jane. Yeah.
Go ahead.
I feel it's also, would you say that it's like, I get the sense that the reason why it's not even that they're ashamed perhaps to accept it as a disability necessarily, whether they're coming up, say that they're more social traits or whatever. I think it's because if it was more fully and broadly, considered and accommodated, because would you say it's because autism by and large seems to be on the surface a right, it's more invisible. It's not a visible physical disability. Then let's say I get the impression that allistic individuals would then see the accommodations that some people would get who maybe on the surface, they're like, oh, they're not disabled, right? And then I see how they would get pissed off and then they would put pressure, right?
Yeah.
to not give them these accommodations.
Yes, because I mean, and if I'll be really honest, I think some of it is because it doesn't make us physically distorted. So our face is not ugly, our bodies are not ugly, according to conventional standards of having a non-disabled body. So our face, our limbs, and even though we tend to have some clusters of things, we have like GI issues, maybe we're bloated all the time, maybe we don't know what to eat, maybe we don't get to move our bodies as much, maybe we have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome and we're hypermobile and we don't know how to manage it. There's all kinds of stuff that can also affect our physical appearance, hygiene, etc. Okay, but broadly
But it's not
speaking,
considered at the same level as something like Down syndrome, for example.
right, exactly. So I think there's even this like cruelty of like, oh, you're deceptive. We thought that everybody that we wouldn't want to include would be ugly. So it's I mean like keeping it $1, like 100%. There's something weird about that, which I find alarming. So I do have to remember, we're not far removed from literal freak show behavior. Like that's what they called people with disabilities. They would throw them in a carnival with like animals they were abusing and run you around and be like, look at this. And I want that conversation to be pushed a little further forward, and it's not me running around flattering myself about how attractive I am. I am saying that disability is perceived in a certain way in the culture that is very uncomfortable for people to talk about. And I think some of the way that autistic people are treated has to do with, you look attractive to me. You look physically attractive. Like, even to the extent that like I have people sexually harassing me
Or
my
it's
whole
like
life.
you don't look pitiable enough
Pitiable,
to the point that
yeah.
I can feel good to help you.
Yes. And I can't be seen. And to an extent, that might be some of the global configurational thing, that it's important for them to be perceived in this way. And it doesn't have to be, but that if you've never investigated this skill split between global configurational and local featural, maybe this has gone unexamined wholly, that maybe they have learned to show off they're helping a person who's visibly disabled. As opposed to us.
Because for example, it's not on the configuration to go and like give money to every single beggar that you see. Most people don't do that, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Pitiable gifting euphoria. Whoa. That's a good term. Wait, let me just read. Okay, we're being held against long-established standards that existed way before autism was even acknowledged. Yes, I've seen able-bodied people get euphoria from giving gifts to disabled, different-looking or disabled people, but it still comes from a place of ostracization, and they're looking at the disabled person and judging them as never going to have access to life standards, so let's give them a plastic toy. Oh, how cute. That's what I was just alluding to, pitiable gifting. Pitiable, and being perceived by people as well who can see what you're doing, that can appreciate, like, maybe some of this is also, again, like, I'm being a little bit too harsh, but maybe some of this is like an unexamined habit of global configurational reasoning, and it just isn't going deeper than that, and it has to, for the sake of disabled people. We need the material conditions to change. We don't need you to look good to your friends. Whew. Wow. Yeah, see, that Enigma says in the chat, I worked at a startup helping blind folks. It didn't accomplish anything and just exploited workers, including blind folks, to make the founder feel good. I don't think looking more pitiable would help. Well, I mean, and to an extent, like, you can actually see aspects of blindness. So we are less noticeable than even somebody with many forms of blindness, not all, but in many cases, like, people notice the lack of focus of the eyes and things like this, and some people actually have like physical changes around the eyes. So it's there's something about this where it's like we are particularly well, and then there's the argument too about, okay, let me back this up a bit. This is another conversation about fetishizing people, and that there is like a trope of like a manic pixie dream girl, and there's kind of a trope of like the nutty professor, sort of like adorable guy, and it's like, these are just autistic people, and just being like, oh, if you're into autistic people, that's fine, because here's some crappy media representation played by an actor who's attractive. So That's
Right,
the
if
thing.
it's not infantilizing, it's fetishizing.
Yeah,
Jesus Christ.
yeah. So there's an issue of that as well, which is, I understand, very uncomfortable to talk about, but that's like a lot of people are being included in that conversation besides autistics that, like, you know, we could stand to have that conversation at a drop of a hat and it would probably be a good idea, even though it's unpleasant, but you know, saying nothing is not worth it. But that's what,
Oh,
you know,
Jane,
yeah.
just a quick second.
Hmm.
A quick thing. I just actually want to ask, can you check if you have Lilith's audio there up? Because you might actually have it down
Oh
potentially.
no, yeah, let me fix it. Sorry, while Lilith was Lilith, oh no.
Mhm.
While you were talking, I had you off, but I thought I would turn back off, and I
Yes.
didn't. No.
I hadn't realized I wasn't muted at that time. You can hear me now, though?
Yes, please go.
Okay. Sure. So I've lost the points of connection to some of the things I was going to say. I was just going to bring up the like stereotype of the autistic savant and the reaction of people like, "Oh, you seem so normal," or whatever when they see someone, or like, especially they say you're so smart.
Mhm.
And it feels like they don't like thinking of someone smarter than them as being disabled, right? You're a genius, right? It's sort of like I feel like this makes a psychological distance between what they consider themselves supposed to like compete with and stand up against. Because if they're like, "Oh, you're a genius and you're disabled, what am I doing with myself? Why aren't I?" Because, generally people seem to take things as personal attacks really, really often.
Right.
And so, like, the autistic savant stereotype, and especially the one you see on TV where they're not they don't have social skills. Like, sure, they can be really smart about things. They can be the best doctor in the world. They could be the best detective in the world, but they can't do the normal day-to-day stuff that you and I can,
Mhm.
right? They're not actually high functioning.
Right.
It's that they get an excuse for it in these stereotypes. They're allowed to be socially abrasive because they're so good at things.
And there's there's something in that too that I want to just touch on. Paige Liel is also trained in ballet and teaches dance now, and she's very pretty. But also, I think we don't get encouraged to move our bodies. I accidentally got in that route and would not let go.
Mhm.
I was like a koala that got the leg finally. I would not let that shit go, and I still won't. And I think that here's a really important thing. Autistic people who are nonverbal respond better to physical therapy, just traditional physical therapy, than speech therapy. So what are we doing? And to an extent, the speech therapy won't make you as attractive as the physical therapy will be to other people. So I do also think there's some leaning into the fact that we do have these noticeable disabilities and not helping us with it, not helping us with our hygiene, not helping us with aspects of our lives that are creating a more challenging road to going out in a presentable way, and that's very upsetting to me as well. So I think that because we're on this cusp of passing for normal, there's this weird dynamic that I'm not describing super well, but I do believe is there.
I really resonate with the point Lilith made about folks who are really good at one thing but not able to do the kind of day-to-day stuff, and them being kind of given a free pass. And kind of, Jane, similar to how you were saying that we're a lot of times not encouraged to use our bodies, like if we're quote unquote getting in the way, and it can be harder to find those opportunities. Similarly, if like sometimes when I tell people something's hard for me and I want to learn like a social thing or like branching out in general and not just being good at one thing, because I want to build a better model. They're like, well, if you're running into challenges, why not just do something else? Or if you're having a hard time learning new things, why not just pick one? And I'm like, because I don't want that to be like the scope of my life exploration, and it's really frustrating.
It doesn't make
Kind
sense
of
either
how
because
little.
well, like I would just want to add this because I think this will help your point. Like along, you are in an environment that doesn't care about your disability, so it's not designed to help you to get to things that ultimately you would be good at after you work out the disability. You're just being given whatever's convenient.
Right.
That
Yes.
We could also say that the global configuration tells you, or to holistic individuals, that you pick a thing and you're supposed to work at that to make a living, as it were, and then you're not incentivized to dilly-dally or do lots of random stuff because that detracts from your social obligations and whatnot.
absolutely. More, I didn't want to cut you off too much.
I also really resonated with that point. I was just going to say quickly, the one especially on like the physical activity, right? I had this like as a kid, and I still sort of have some, I guess even some leftover shame about the fact that, well, I was pretty good at some, abstract thinking. I could do academics and whatnot, but then not knowing or even just having this internalized belief that like you can only do one thing, right? Or that there's no point to you trying to engage in, let's say, certain types of activities that may be healthy for you because you're quote unquote not made that way, right? Or that there's like more important things. And it's just another point to how it's disabling, right? Yeah.
And also, I think also like this is a misunderstanding of like our dyspraxia. So like if Kyle's can pop on real quick just to back me up on this. So like in ballet, I was always running into people. I found a way to reduce that over time, and I started later, so I didn't have a buffer to fix it younger or come up with a strategy. So I got through that, even starting really late for a girl, and I still managed to get through it. And I'm still dyspraxic as hell. I run into things, I knock things over every single day. I can't get the key into the lock of my front door without like 5 tries. So it's like I'm still dyspraxic, but I can do classical ballet at an extremely high level that I'm still getting better at it in many aspects, even just like thinking about it and doing my job where I'm moving my body and getting to learn about fascia. So it's like I still have dyspraxia. So me being a ballet dancer in any capacity that I got to be one doesn't look normal. I'm still autistic. I have all these other things, but the skill that I have is actually very, very well developed, and you'd be hard pressed to find a single person who could deny that, who knows what the hell they're looking at with ballet, and I'm really proud of that. And it's not a hierarchical claim that I'm making. I never went to a company that like would even be recognizable to anybody. Anything I did was really small, really small. But I still did it, and I'm still, if you actually throw me in a class, you'll be like, oh wow, some of that's really good. Huh, how did that happen? Well, I have dyspraxia, but it doesn't mean I can't learn this. And it doesn't mean that it wasn't important for me to learn this. It just means that like I'm living in this alternate framing of the things in my culture. And I think one of the best things I ever did was ballet. Right. And to explain that to people would be very difficult because it's like it wasn't a career, quote unquote, but it's led to things for me. But I always have to justify it in terms that neurotypical people will understand. And I'm like, no, I needed this because I have dyspraxia, and my self-esteem would have been destroyed without it.
Wow.
See.
That resonates so hard. It reminds me of this interview I had recently that really threw me off. So I've thought through how I'd introduce myself, and like kind of, what I did with my career, starting with post-college, because that's what people expect me to hear. And also it's, it comes with skills that are relevant to what I'm doing now. And then this interviewer asked me 2 different times after. This ended up basically taking up the whole time and throwing me off so much that I didn't have any time to ask my questions about the role and the company, stuff that would have helped me better showcase how I could be helpful to them. But basically, like, he asked why I made each decision to like make each transition. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, there's so much there. Like,
Yes.
I thought I'd already come up with a story. Now you're asking me to translate it into Spanish, and once I'm exhausted from that, you're asking me to translate it into French. And then you didn't see that it was a 45-minute call and had to leave at 30. But yeah.
Short explanation
Yeah, like
is
I really
you did it because that was the only way for you to continue to thrive as a human being in the environment that you're disabled in,
yes.
and not be defined by the
Yes.
environment's shit standards for you.
Yes. Absolutely. And like that's a very personal story, and like actually I'm feeling limited in my career options because I have been focusing on companies that are very early stage and strapped for cash, because they love when I want to focus on what is their number one problem, can I help solve it, and bypass all of this. Basically they're in survival mode to the point where they can't afford to spend weeks in this can I trust you, and they're better at coming up with something small I can do collaboratively with me, and then use that to determine whether they can trust me, rather than it being based on how I tell a life story. That's like my life story is way more different from what they'd expect versus my like what can I do for them, which there are differences there as well. And it's frustrating when a lot of roles are packaged in a certain way, you know, like if you that someone doing this kind of work usually also does this other kind of work, which to global configurational people, from that perspective, it feels like they go together because they work towards the same goals. From my learning about things kind of perspective, they're like on different continents. And so I've been trying to figure out where can I do this without also having to do this.
Yep.
Or can I also do, you know, maybe combine it with this random other thing I'm good at?
And we have to, and this is where like we have a lot of kind of anecdotal evidence from people who get diagnosed as adults that we do our best when we just invent our own jobs, because we have these assortments of skills. And if we've made it that far as adults, we need to do like a major course correction of like, okay, well, the stuff that I made up to do is valuable and I have to insist on it, which is not a great plan in the current social environment, with the caveat of like, okay, you can go viral, but then welcome back to problem number one here. Okay, cool, we're going to be in disabling circumstances with peer abuse that we would self-exclude from. So I'm having kind of a circular problem with that myself, where it's like I believe in some of the insights that I have, but I hate the social environment online so much. It's so not only unaccommodating, but it's like you might as well just slingshot me directly in front of bullies, or well, the bullies, peer abusers. So it's a really weird time to try to fix this natural situation we find ourselves in, which is a good situation, which is that we have chosen to go after things that we thought were a good idea based on our own reasoning, which we are correct. They are good ideas. Maybe they're not the best ideas from a global configurational perspective, but we don't have that perspective, so what does it matter? You know what I mean? Like, who cares? I mean, somebody cares, but we can never care. So we can't run our lives exclusively on that, even though in the current society, that's how you get rewarded with money, is by being able to do that. So I don't know what to do. That's where I start to throw up my hands and just get a little frustrated and think maybe like the TikToks we're watching are not going nearly far enough. And that it needs to be like a legislative push, that we need to say, no, we are disabled. I'm sorry that makes you uncomfortable. It makes me uncomfortable too. This needs to be changed right now. Like, I can't navigate this in this way forever. It's exhausting. And if I'm telling you the truth about it, I am so uncomfortable having to confront people who do not have this disability, or even who do have a similar disability and haven't framed it this way yet, and I have to do some legwork here. But it's so uncomfortable to do that I might not, even though I think it's one of the most important things I could do with my life, is to try to advocate for this, and that this is the level that we need to operate on. This is what's actually happening.
You're like 100% correct, Jane, because like I am.
Hearing any audio either.
Yeah,
Ro,
I can hear you, Ro.
you can hear Ro?
I just got out like
I
right in the middle there.
I could not.
Oh, you cannot. I couldn't either. Start. Can you? I'm so sorry. Can you read? Just go from the start.
Yeah, did I suddenly cut off there? I noticed that
Yeah.
because I'm on the phone.
Yeah.
Yeah, apologies.
No
Yeah,
worries.
I was really, yeah, I was really just, everything that you said is exactly the reality of things. And like, it's the same, it's no different, I think, anywhere in the world. I'm in the UK, and I think I'm also feeling the need that I would like to contribute to actually pushing some activism driven change, right? To actually bring in some real legislative change as well, because I think what I'm starting to become aware of from what you're describing is that I can't deny more and more that, as we've said in the chat, sorry, in the conversation, that we are disabled, that this is a disability, because I've made this decision when I left home because I felt like it was the right thing to do, to be able to make my own path forward, right? Because I was not happy living in the configurational system, right? That like everybody else lives by. It was kind of like leading towards suicide in a sense. And what I've kind of discovered 2 years onwards was that I still cannot find any path in the conventional world, as it were, right? In the general configuration that would be able to sustain me for like the next long while, that I can sort of safely say that this is something that I could do, and then I wouldn't have to worry about like the most basic necessities in order to survive, right? And the only reason why I'm being kept afloat at the moment is through like the subsidies that I get for the disability payments. And if I didn't have those, I would be screwed. And then I can't exactly, I can't even conceive of the fact of going back into working a conventional or a service type job, because then I'd be miserable, because then I wouldn't be able to get some of the things that I need to even get the bare minimum of my needs met. And yeah, ultimately, all of this is a systemic issue. It's an issue of there not being enough accommodations, and just people generally not understanding what this is. And the only way that this can change is it has to change at a top level, right? From a top down perspective.
Right. And we need to tell people that, I do believe in this. And I was listening to an interview with the comedian who's been featured a few times because of the book she came out with, Strong Female Character, I think it is. And it's oh gosh, she's Scottish. Fern
Fern
Brady?
Brady.
Fern Brady. Okay. So she was actually talking about during these interviews that she believes that we are in a civil rights fight, and it's early. So she's saying like, and she's saying like maybe people think of this as extreme, but that she relates to earlier phases of like the gay civil rights movement. She may have also even talked about the black civil rights movement. I'm not sure, I don't want to misquote her, but she was trying to allude to a serious civil rights issue. And I agree with that. And I also think that we shouldn't undersell our importance to our society, because there's reasons why we're not participating in society. And it's not because we don't want to. It's not because we're lazy. It's not because we're entitled. It's not because we think we're too good for it. Okay, so like we are disabled. We are disabled. I don't need a cute acceptable way to share that with people. I need them to know that there's a form of disability they are uncomfortable with, and that's way too bad that they're uncomfortable with it, because I have it. And I have friends that have it, and I have people that I care about who have it, who I've never even met, because I know how it feels, and it feels like shit. And it kills people because it feels that bad. And I don't like to be dramatic. I don't. That sucks. I don't want people to feel that bad. That's what I think. I think even just knowing this can make you feel good enough to not get that bad, right? I think even just this is enough hope. We don't need much, but what we actually need at the end of that is for this discussion to be taken seriously. And right now it won't be. That's my concern. Right now, my title about self-excluding, I can't. There's places I would not want to put this on Twitch, and it would be probably 80% of it. 80% easily, right? And maybe I'm lowballing that, because I would be dealing with peer abuse immediately.
You mean from a would you say, is it from a perspective, because I even thought that even before the peer abuse, like it wouldn't there wouldn't even be many people gravitating to even sort of like see the content, right? Whether they wouldn't understand it or they would like see no need for it.
Right, there'd be no need for it. It would be belittled. It would be discredited. It would be, that's fine. Like, and then
question.
Yes, it would be put into question. And supposedly my problem that I would have with that is that I would be made to feel bad. I don't even care anymore. I don't care. Maybe 18-year-old me would care about feeling bad, but I'm an adult. I'm mature. I don't care. What I do care about is this getting resolved and addressed. I don't want new additional problems on top of it, and I don't want insistent bullies and abusers to then try to give me a problem when I say I don't care, because I do not. Because I get that kind of abuse. That's the kind of abuse we attract, is somebody that says, oh, I'll give you something to cry about. Right? If we sound like we're remotely upset about the situation, when in actual fact, this is a serious disability that is not treated seriously because we can talk pretty. That is the stupidest thing that our species is currently doing without paying any attention to it. We're doing a lot of other stupid things, but we at least spend some time on the news talking about the stupid stuff we do. This is invisible.
Yeah, and I think sort of the track that you're on to sort of like, build up that model, in your perception of it, I think it definitely does work, because like I can sort of even see it in my life. It kind of echoed when I applied for the disability grants that I got, right? I didn't have like the autism diagnosis. I had the ADHD one, but it was like looked very derisively because I didn't have it from like, I had it from a specialized clinic, right, and not the NHS system. So they thought that, either I paid for it, it wasn't real. And then my trauma, right, I had like my own experiences being questioned at every point, right, to say that they straight out actually concluded that I was being delusional, but they didn't tell me, by the way. I only found out through chasing them up, right? And so I think in my experience, you have to make up a model. You have to give them lots of information, evidence, deluge that kind of stuff. Be really loud. And it seems to be the only way that like anything gets done, which is really sad that it is like that, but it seems like they don't listen to anything else, unfortunately.
To each other. They're listening to their current system, the current structure that isn't working for us. Why would you do that? Show me that structure. Show me anybody from that structure, a thriving autistic person who has our kind of a disability. Show me one. And take credit for it. And then in fact have that interview that person that you take credit for. See who they have to thank for it. You know what I mean? It's probably a couple of people that were mentors in their lives and luck, and dead stark luck. And a kind of resilience that most people don't have to have, and then being told that we're weak, being thought to be more vulnerable than other people, being naive, being all this stuff. So it's very infuriating to have this disability and to fight forward with it against resistance, where it's not like we want like an award for it. I just want it to end. I want it to be resolved. I want it to be addressed. And how do I have that happen without me explaining it on this, more emphatically assertive way? Like I have to tell people. That's where I'm at with it, and it's like I don't know, and I'm even in, really. Like I'm even in a we just want to be able to live our lives, yes, and I'm in a better place. Like I have a very supportive husband now, which is amazing. I have supportive parents, but they're also clearly on the spectrum, so they clearly also have disabilities in kind with my own, and I'm trying to figure out how to help them while helping myself while getting help from a partner. And I had to understand that analogously, I am basically in a analogous situation to somebody who has uh, a visual impairment, severe to, like congenital visual impairment, with somebody who's completely sighted. So that's basically the dynamic I get to have, and my partner is able to understand other things because their brain is a little bit unusual, right? So it's important for me to be with people who we don't need to have terms for all of it, and it may be helpful to keep getting our diagnosis sorted out. I think it probably is, but by and large, this person just doesn't have my disability, and that's going to improve my life. And that's we shouldn't have to rely on that. We shouldn't have to rely on navigate towards the relationships that other people take for granted. Definitely, we should also get to have chances at those sorts of relationships. Yes, absolutely, but that shouldn't be how you navigate towards being okay at all. And that's my concern, is that we basically are having to rely on family members, and that's it. And we're seen as people who that can't possibly be true about us, because that's other disabled people. That's not you.
Yeah, and then for others, like I know I can say, because like reflecting in my case, for me it's like spirituality. It's for others. I'm sure Shadow, if she was here, she would agree. It's like when you don't have specific angles, then there's very few options that are left. Or even a connection to nature, to animals, or stuff like that. I mean.
And we need help being able to care for animals that also help us. Like I have a dog who's going to have to have serious elbow surgery because the doctors also probably mismanaged his elbow while it was injured. So, and I had to be an advocate for my dog, and I failed my dog to an extent because of my autism as well. So that sucks, right? And I need I don't know what to say to people. It's like why do you feel entitled to support, is the sort of the attitude you can get. I'm like, I don't know, why do you feel entitled to this world that enforces a disability that doesn't have to be this bad? Why does everyone feel like this is fine when we're having people tell you, I am disabled, this is not fine? And you have people that aren't even disabled who are saying it's not fine. So it's not like I'm proposing something that wouldn't help other people. Like we have a system that we have a structural problem, and the structure, if you work on it, it's not arbitrary. You can't just make up a structure and decide it's going to work. Like material reality will tell you if it works or not. You can't just do the emperor has on clothes all day long. The great and powerful Wizard of Oz, look at him go. You can't do that, and that's what we're doing, and that's what people get exasperated with and frustrated with, and even sometimes the doomer mentality that they get, that sort of nihilism is a reflection of that as well. So it's like I'm saying true things that most people would agree with, but in what way is this? What the fuck do I do? Like I don't know. So yeah, that's just a rant.
Well, it's like I suppose a lot of people say that it's not all right, and they agree, but. It's hard. I suppose a lot of people then would, then think, well, then some things would have to be done about it. But then when you're starting from like yourself, from just one individual, it can seem impossible to just, to bring in a whole new system, to change the system that is. And so then like everybody then might, a lot of people then feel like it's very difficult to do anything about it. So then they just circle around talking about how it's not all right. And that's all that ever is done about it, right?
Yeah. Right. And yeah, exactly. And I think it's useful. Like, I'm really glad to have this time because, well, I kind of clean my house sometimes. Today was not that great, but I really needed this space to talk. And
I'm really grateful because, like, for the majority of my days during the week, like, I literally don't have anyone to talk to. I mean, yeah, because of circumstances, because I moved into a new town, but like, people who are autistic who then. Because I just had the realization that if, the self-isolation, the self-exclusion, sometimes, right, we self-isolate because we don't want to take on any more problems, like we said before, right? Yes. We deprive ourselves of some things because of the potential implications that come from that, the commitments and whatnot. And then you might not have the experience to know, like, if you pass a certain point, even if it's successful, what new problems might come from that.
Yes.
And like it's like, how do you live from the perspective of trying new things, of trying again at some stuff if you've had setbacks, ordeals for the entirety of your life, right? And it's like, that's kind of like the place that I'm kind of getting at, which is, it's not so much that I'm running out of steam, but it's kind of like, it's almost, I feel like I'm waiting for death. It's odd to say, but it's like I'm waiting for death because then I don't have to worry about the future, right? Because then if I don't have to do anything new, if I don't have to, potentially think about a solution or try to kind of, and then fail again however many times until I theoretically get to like a safe place or I don't have to worry about these things. Well, but yeah, it's
Well, and
hard
then
to do it on your own. Yeah.
it's hard to do on your own. We don't have role models. What kind of pushes me forward, where I keep returning to this, is we have to see people like us. We have to hear. Right now, see is very loosely being applied, but like you can hear us. We have to find people like us. Yeah, we need to know. Okay, well, how do things turn out for people like us? So we're not trying everything for the first time with no feedback, nothing. We can't. Nobody lives like that. That's not remotely fair. That's not how anything works when you have these social skills that we don't have to begin with. But also, like, as soon as we try to be visible, now we're back to the same problem of we might need to do self-exclusion. Hi, Hambliss. I need to get back to you on stuff, by the way. I'm aware of this. I'm getting back on top of stuff, hence me here. Also, hi, good to see you. But yeah, so back to the whole thing of like, we have disabling circumstances if we try to share ourselves in a public forum like this. I'm grateful for any opportunity to do so, right? But then I know that I will be subject to peer abuse if I do this. But if I don't do this, then other people won't see it. But then if I do this, then people have to watch another autistic person dealing with peer abuse, and then they may self-exclude because I've been made an example of. So how do you deal with that? And that's scary, and I maybe it wouldn't happen, but I'm very afraid that it would, because I've had experiences enough with that it seems likely. And again, I've had those experiences because I can't see the information that would help me to avoid some of those problems. That's why I get targeted in the first place.
Yeah, if it's any consolation, it's really admirable to just see you kind of be at the stage and the place that you're at, because in some ways I see you kind of as being, say, ahead in my journey, where you've put yourself out there in some ways, trying out certain projects, and then you've obviously come to terms with direct criticism and then unfair opposition, and then you kind of still push forward and like, right?
Yeah.
It's never easy when that kind of comes up, and I think we have this well, it's not an oversensitivity, it's just that like it's genuinely unfair, and then like it's really they don't understand sometimes with the things that they say or how they see things, that it cuts pretty directly and pretty
right
deeply.
It's like, oh, I'll just go to the place where it's easy and I'm not disabled. Okay, no problem, I'll just go over there. Yeah, where's that? Like, like, no.
Yes. My gosh. I feel like I'm being tossed around, but this person saying go over there because they see the problems here but not over there, and then someone over there saying the opposite. But anyway, the main thing that I wanted to say was, Jane, I really resonate with everything you said about the like not getting feedback and support, and then trying to like become super visible to find it. Like, I went public out of desperation because like I just wasn't getting the information that I needed, and like finding people who were like willing to help, and I was feeling really exhausted, continuously putting myself out there, talking to 100 frogs to meet one person who finally gets it.
Mm-hmm.
So then I started doing this pull approach, and then I'm like bombarded with, not nearly to the extent of being on Twitch, but yeah, the neurodiversity internet and like all the problems there. And I really admire how thoughtful you are about all of this, and about the impact on people based on what they see. And I resonate with what Rose said about, I'm really grateful that you put out the things that you have, and they have really changed my life. I'm also glad that you are thinking about how people would see the comment section as well. And I don't know how it works on Twitch, but like maybe there are some things where you don't need to have commenting available, or you need to like create, or you could like create barriers where they can only bring certain things up in a dynamic where it's like like a periodic conversation with you and a couple other people there who are like dedicated to keeping you safe, rather than making comments while you're trying to do a stream and like having to manage all of that simultaneously. Like that sounds really exhausting. But anyway, the main point is I'm glad that you're also considering that, because like I've been thinking about how public I want to be about what and where, seeing the responses that people get when they talk about similar things does influence where I say what and what kind of things I bother sharing. And yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's my man, I have so many concerns about this. Like I find it very challenging to navigate the social environment. I have found huge advantages of being as visible as I have been, which is not very, because I have you just kind of have to be like, whoop, not that way, not that way. It just feels like you're ducking these like boulders coming down another, pretty narrow corridor. So it leaves you kind of in the back channels of these spaces. But to an extent, it's like I met Kyle because of Twitch, right? And to an extent, I'll even say I have less interest in certain aspects of the internet because I was driving myself forward so that I could meet more people, because I was pretty sure I could actually meet a compatible person that also could work with my disability. I was pretty sure that like that was a statistical possibility, and I wanted to try to do that. And I somehow got into enough places, spaces, things, while also cultivating things I wanted to do, which again doesn't make any, trust me, my life does not make sense to anybody. Even when people respect it and like it, getting there, nobody was like, go ahead and do that, Jane, that's a good idea. Okay. So even when I get respect for it, I had parents that did not stop me and were kind of willing to let me shove along. I had enough resources financially, which most people don't. And even then I don't have that many, right? So there's still like a boulder coming at me from the back. So there's a lot of stuff going on that I've been balancing out, because I'm like, shit, somehow I'm still going, right? So the only thing that keeps me going is when I check and my legs are still under me and I'm still going and I'm a little bit better in some way. So I'm like, well, then I got to keep going, because I know how many ways we can get wiped out. Okay. And it's not on purpose necessarily. Sometimes I think it is, but I think that the gauntlet we're running is ridiculous, and it just can't be this ridiculous. And the things that I've had to do to beat the odds, I still don't look like shit compared to like the amounts of odds I've had to beat. And to have to prove that to somebody before I get listened to, I'm not doing that. I am not doing that. I found people in my life that believe that, and I know people that are attracted to this channel who, or this message, to what I'm doing, are responding to, you are having actual episodic memories of how this applies to your life. And I want to tell you, you're not crazy, you're disabled. You're not crazy, you're disabled. And that's what it's like to be disabled when nobody realizes your disability exists.
Yeah, really, thank you for saying that. That's
right.
That's been very helpful. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
Definitely.
it's actually, it's what you said. It's not even just the internet, but just the social world in general, dealing with other people who have not had the same lived experience, who are not disabled like this. It kind of always it muddies the water. And then, at least at the stage that I'm at, thankfully, I have voices like today, which then remind me and reaffirm the fact that this is the reality, right, for people like ourselves. And then, no matter how many times that like you can get led astray, I guess, or people put it into question, you start having doubts. Perhaps you think that, oh, if I did something differently, oh, if I try this again, and it's good to be able to escape the spirals of essentially being exploited, right, in the society, which will basically try to use as much of you as possible while giving as little as possible, or actually while actively harming you as much as possible as well. So yeah.
P.S. It's 3:02, so we should probably wrap up. I think maybe this week I wanted to do evening streams, and maybe I can continue to do this. There's like 2 more videos. I'll see if Lilith can come through to that one too. But if I let me think about this. Hold on a second. 3 p.m. tomorrow was the time that I wanted to test out, Pacific Standard Time. So it'd be like 3 to 5 Pacific Standard Time. If people aren't awake, totally understand. Not even an issue. I think that's like not great for UK, but I was gonna try that out as one possible time.
Sorry, I blanked out there for a sec. Something happening tomorrow, is it?
Yeah, I'm gonna try. So tomorrow, I want to try to do a Monday, Wednesday stream. And at first, I don't know what time would work the best, so I'm gonna try a 3 p.m. It's basically now to 5 p.m. tomorrow.
You're in California, right?
Yeah. So it's 3
That's
for me
like,
right
what,
now.
8 hours?
I think so. Yeah.
Oh, it's 3 for you. So okay, so that's 6, 7, 8. That's 8 hours. Yeah, that is 8 hours behind.
What time is it for you?
Well, it's 11 p.m.
11 p.m. Okay, so maybe you can come through to that, but I'm definitely going to do it tomorrow.
Yeah,
I finally have a
it's
day
all
off.
right.
So 3 p.m. tomorrow, if people can make it, let me make sure I write this on my little Cognifactor thingy. So yeah, I will do that. And it'd be nice to try to finish the 2 videos that I did not get to, but that seems about right.
All right, we were dilly-dallying a little bit, which is good as well.
It was awesome. This was a really amazing discussion. I appreciate everybody who came and your contributions. It's really good to hear from everyone too, especially after just kind of being out of it.
Oh, congratulations on the recent wedding, I think, right?
Thank you.
Like that.
Thank you. Yes. Have my
Nice.
Yeah, I have my dress off.
So that's actually, in a sense, that's actually a promise that, for the rest of us, it could also be a potential possibility.
It is. I was also like not really convinced it was, and we can totally do that. That's a thing we can do. Yeah, be picky, be super picky, but it is a thing.
We'll see about that. All right then.
Okay, I'm gonna pop off, and thank you everyone. Any closing thoughts before I go?
I definitely would love to continue this thread. Bro, I could stay behind for a little bit. Yeah, well, and then
it'll be a little bit for me too, because I'll be going to bed.
Yeah, please feel free to use the space whenever, by the way. Like if there's any time that y'all are in the Discord and you wanted to see if people are around and do discussions, we can keep working on formats for that too. I just want to throw that out there. And yeah, whenever we do these streams, even if I pop off, you're always welcome to chat whenever.
But yeah, I'm really excited to continue this topic and hoping I can join the evening streams.
Oh, yay. Excellent. Okay, so I hope to see you tomorrow. And I'm going to try to do Wednesday as well that week. We'll see how that goes. But definitely tomorrow I'm going to have a stream. So we'll watch more of these videos and see if we can get through the rest of them, which is very questionable. Okay. All right. Okay. Bye, everyone. Bye, everybody who watches this stream later.